we can confirm that tomorrow with the board secretary when I get to my office, that I have filed with you. If I didn't provide notices, then I'll notice for the next hearing that's going to be scheduled for. But I'm taking the position today that notices were provided, so the board has jurisdiction to put us to the meeting. If at that time I didn't do it, then I'll notice anyway, so.
So what we can do is, I can announce in the event the board, which I also don't have my notes, Mr. Chairman, so, in the event the board already took jurisdiction, I will announce that it's carried, to May 28th. And in the event we do not have jurisdiction, Mr. Alonso has indicated he will renotice so we can establish jurisdiction. Okay?
And
Is
this
that correct?
My understanding was that this was going to be carried to April
Oh.
16th.
April
16th.
16th, okay.
Special meeting.
April 16th, okay.
yes,
So everything I said the same, is that?
it is getting carried over to the regular meeting of April 16, 2015.
Okay, so in the event that the board has already established jurisdiction, we'll carry this to April 16th, and the applicant consents to that,
That's correct.
and it will be scheduled in this room, in this building, at 6:30 p.m., no further notice is required. And in the event that the board does not have jurisdiction yet, which we will confirm tomorrow, the applicant is agreed, or will be required to renotice for April 16th.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, on to unfinished business. First one is A, continuation of the matter application number 2014-04 and application number 2014-05 filed by Gaetano Graziano Development LLC for property located at 1612 Polk Street, Block 137 and Lot 4 and Lot 5. The applicant proposes to remove existing structures and subdivide the lot into 2 lots and construct a 3-family dwelling on each lot. First hearing held on August 14, 2014. Is there anyone here for this matter?
Yes.
How you doing?
My name is Frank Bertolini. I represent the applicant.
John McDonough said thank you
LLC.
for the recommendation on the
Here
restaurant.
tonight with two witnesses. I have the architect, Mr. Caraballo, who did start his testimony last time when he testified. I don't know if it was the same people on the board, it was so long ago, or everybody remembers, but he's here again. So I'll have him come up and explain the application.
Okay. There's 2 ways we could proceed. Given that we only have 5 members here and there's at least 1 new member, that would only leave 4. So we can't vote tonight anyway, so we'd have to order a transcript. I believe because Mr. Martins was not here for the first application.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
We can order the transcript.
All right, so we can put in all the testimony tonight because we only have 4 voting members who are eligible to vote. What can happen is Mr. Martins can get a transcript, read it, certify that he read it, and then all 5 can vote, or other members of the board can also read it. If we have a couple other members.
Yeah, we'll get a transcript of that hearing, the August, what was it, August 13th?
Yeah, I believe
August 13th and 14th.
August 4th, I have in my notes.
August 4th?
Yeah.
And can we all get transcripts because it goes back a long way? and
Yeah.
I'd like to read that as
No,
well.
that's,
No, we'll get transcripts for everybody.
yes, I'll get it for the previous hearing, and I'll get it for this hearing, in case someone's not here
Yeah.
who wants to listen to it.
Thank you.
Reread it.
Council, I'm sorry. Can you spell your last name for me?
Sure, it's Rivellini, R-I, V as in Victor, E-L-L-I-N-I, and my first name is Frank.
Thank you.
Mr. Caraballo, do I have to come up here? He was previously sworn in, should be sworn in again, he was qualified.
Yeah. You can go ahead and swear in.
Yeah, let's swear in again since Elmer is new on the board. Yeah,
Okay, may I
Yes.
before you get started, I'm sorry. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, help you God?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Caraballo, could you explain to the board what we're proposing here?
Well, first of all, I have to get accepted as an expert, right?
He was last time.
We previously accepted him as an expert, but for Mr. Martin, why don't we just briefly go over his qualifications?
Okay.
That's fine. I have a bachelor's of architecture from New Jersey Institute of Technology from 1980. Been licensed since 1986. I currently own my own firm, Jose Cabrera Architectural Group. appeared in front of this board since 1986, as well as the planning board. Appeared in every single board in Hudson County, about 50% of the boards in Bergen County. But I've been here since my beginning.
Yeah. I'd ask that you accept it as an expert. If you will work.
Yes, if you would move him as an expert.
I move him as an expert.
Thank you.
Mr. Caraballo, can you give the board a description of what we're doing here or proposing?
Certainly, the property in front of me today, tonight, is 1610 Gold Street. It's a 50 by 100 property, and we're planning to demolish existing buildings on site, and in their place, build 2 3-family buildings. These buildings are attached to each other. As you see on the first page of your plans, on the left-hand side, you have your site plan. And basically, you see the building is situated more or less in the center of the property. You have a 20-foot setback from the front, 13-foot setback from the back, and 3-foot one setback from either side. It's a 3-story building. It's no different than most 2 families that you see in the area, except that what we want to do with this building, aside from the 2 families on the second and third floor, is behind the garage, proposing a 3rd unit. When we were here in August of last year, there were several applications for legalizing of apartments. Basically, what we want to do is make sure that this building does not have to come back and be legalized and take out the board sign. We want to have that 3rd unit already as part of this application. As such, this building will be fully sprinkled. It was fully made by the wood frame, but it would be fully sprinkled as a 3-family building.
While you're on that topic, if this was just a if they were each 2-family dwellings,
Right.
would the structures look any different?
No.
In terms of layout or anything else?
The structures would look exactly the same. Like I said, I've been here since 1986. I've done my share of 2-family buildings, strictly 2-family buildings, and they all look the same. And what happens is,
You still have that room behind the
you still
garage?
have that room behind the garage, and whether that room is directly connected to the first floor via stairwell or not, it does get converted to a 3-family building. And I don't have to, or I should say, it gets converted to an illegal unit, which then will come back in here, legalized. And I don't have to tell you that story because you guys have seen it many, many times.
And if it's a 2-family, would there be sprinklers in that structure?
No, there will not be sprinklers on the structure, and this one as a 3-family has to be sprinkled.
So we're just trying to come out with this from the get-go like this because we feel with the sprinklers, it's a better proposal.
Correct.
Okay.
If you go back to the floor plans on page 2 of 3, you're gonna see the 3 levels. On the left-hand side, we call the ground floor plan. You're gonna see that the apartments for each one of the buildings, or the apartment for each one of the buildings, is located towards the rear of the building, right behind the garage areas. We're providing 4 parking spaces per building, which basically will be used by the second and third floor units. The variance we'll be seeking tonight, and we have a planner here to testify to that, is for that 1-bedroom unit that is on the first floor. That would be the 3rd unit. We feel pretty comfortable with this because it's a big parking lot, a municipal parking lot, but I'm not gonna have to wait from here. There's a parking permit could be acquired. The upper 2 units are all 3-bedroom units. Obviously, kitchen, bathrooms, living room, dining room area, no different than most 2 families that you see here day in, day out. On the first page, you're gonna see the elevations of the building. Again, there's nothing earth-shattering about this building. It's a 3-story building. There's brick on the front, siding on both the sides, and basically that's my presentation for tonight. I'm here for questions.
Does any board member have any questions?
Can you ask questions after we read the transcripts?
Go for it.
Okay, because I,
Mr. Rivellini, do you,
I didn't anticipate bringing anybody back, so I don't want to foreclose the idea.
Right. Ms. Puerto, that's up to you. If you want to read the transcripts and have the applicant and experts come back. Or if you're comfortable asking questions now. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd have to, like, look at this, I didn't get a chance to really look in depth and.
the other alternative that we have, counsel, is that I only have a page and a half of notes from August 4th. We can discount and strike and withdraw any testimony from August 4th.
Yeah, he really didn't say anything on August fourth,
Okay.
he had it said tonight.
All right,
It
so-
wasn't really that much longer on August fourth.
Right, so what you can do is withdraw any testimony from August 4th. That way, we're only presenting testimony tonight.
Okay,
We still need to get a transcript because Mr. Martin's, we only have 4 here to vote.
right.
And we'll, oh wait, no, we would have 5, but you have the option of waiting for a transcript and having a vote of 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think we would probably take that option,
Okay,
but I would withdraw the testimony of Mr. Caravallo from August fourth, so we could start tonight.
okay,
That makes it easier, I believe.
all right, because I don't believe there was any, my notes reflect there was nothing said on August 4th that wasn't said just now. So the applicant withdrawing all testimony from August 4th, only presenting testimony tonight. The applicant still wants to request transcripts to have more than 5 people vote, so we'll not vote tonight.
Sounds good. And then at the next meeting, any board member has any questions?
Well, questions need to come now, because
Now, okay.
tonight is the only time they will be up here.
Well, I have a question. On the driveways there, they go all the way up to the property line, right?
Driveways do go all the way out to the property line. We have a 20-foot depth, which is more than enough to park the car. The reason we did that is we don't want any cars parked and sticking out onto the sidewalk or be on the property.
Okay. Now my only thing is, I don't see any greenery.
The only thing that we've done is we provided a couple of trees in front of the property.
Okay.
You can see the trees there.
Well, I guess I have an old plan. Doesn't show here in this one.
This is actually, what the chairman is looking at is actually the engineering drawings.
Okay.
And you're looking probably at a site plan, there's gotta be a landscaping plan, or there will be a landscaping plan, how do you prepare those?
Was this plan,
No, that was,
the old one?
it's that, with that. And that was,
And we just had an engineer, Mark Martin, draw up the, because it was a subdivision, we just had him draw up the plan to show and check the dimensions and whatever.
but if you look at the architectural plan, you're gonna see two trees in front of the building.
Okay. In each, and,
Right, what we did is we put it right in front of the, where the stairwell is, just to miss the sidewalks and stuff, so the curb cuts will still be within the property line. So,
Is that 2 trees in front of each proposed building, or 2 trees total?
one tree each in front of, one tree in front of each,
Okay.
two total.
Two total.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, in our letter back from last year, we had just asked the applicant, we noted that they were proposing 2 trees, and we had just asked that they identify the species of tree.
What would you like? Do you have any preference, somebody asked you that?
Well, you know, I don't know what type of trees are on the street right now. I mean, I could probably give you a listing of trees that would be appropriate, but it might make sense to go with what's on the street right now.
So we put that on the record, that whatever's on the street will match that species.
Great. Council, condition of approval, the applicant will contact the board planner to work with the board planner on the type of tree.
Absolutely.
any other questions by any board member?
I have a question on the parking. Just so that I understand, can I read through this? So it says the required parking spots are, according to the RSIS, is 6 spaces for each home, right? for a total of 12 spaces,
That is correct.
and the proposed are 4.
That is correct.
That's it, so 4, including the driveway?
That's correct. There's 2 inside and 2 outside for each one of the buildings.
Okay. And Polk Street, I mean, that whole area, is that
It's
a
all
really
driveways.
congested space where there's no parking on the street, and it's really difficult to find parking?
I mean, the left side of Old Street,
Is
which is a
drive-
long way, is all driveways, which is basically what they're proposing to build, they're all the same style.
Mhm.
Garage, driveway, garage, and 2 families on top. So, on the right side, there is some warehouses, and there is kind of parking on that side. Not as, some on the right side. But like I said, the left side is all driveways.
So, Ms. Berto, the applicant has testified that there's a nearby municipal lot. Now, before we get into whether the board likes that reasoning or thinks that's a good enough answer, their planner will come up here and talk about the variance required and whether or not what the standard is for the board to consider
And
when
we'll
it
talk
comes to
about
that.
how far the lot is and how realistic it is
Correct.
to walk to the lot and park. And I'm sorry, what's the structure that's on here now?
There was a house in the garage. Was.
It wasn't, that's demolished. I'm trying to remember which building this was, only, okay. And, no, I know, because I went, like, I'll go visit these sites, and then it's like, oh, that's it, okay. So it was, okay, so it was a 1 family? A 2 family, it could be a 2 family. And so this is the structure, it was really just like a 2 family,
It probably was, yeah.
and now the proposed is for 6 families.
That is correct.
Is there any reason why it's a proposed like 6 family, all of a sudden it's so condensed into a spot,
I think
rather
I-
than just a nice 2 family?
I think I explained the reason why.
No. I missed that.
We're proposing 2 families, 1 for each one of the properties. The subdivision is 2 properties.
The property is 50 feet by, what is it, 100? Yeah, so the zoning requires 25 by 100. So what Mr. Caraballo has testified to is he could put on here, he could subdivide this and then put 2 legal 2 families that have an issue and design the same type of house,
Right.
which is gonna have, some kind of room in the back, and then we might sell it to somebody, we might sell it to somebody, but eventually, the street is potentially is that ends up being, another unit anyway, illegally. I'm not
It's-
proposing that we're suggesting that, but I'm just saying that's the reality of what could happen. And what we think is a better idea is to just come in here and just show it to you, and we can sprinkle it on you. And, build it as a 3-family, which probably has some other construction restraints on it too. And, we just think it's a safer, better way of doing it.
Is this requiring a D1 use variance?
It needs a use
It does need a
variance,
use
yes.
variance, a D1 use variance?
Yes. Well, the plan will get into that, but we need
Right.
5 votes.
No, understood.
Yeah,
And so that's just a little bit more challenging, as I understand it, to get, to approve a D1. You have to kind of go through a lot more hoops to prove your point. So it's not just as easy, and I don't agree with you that it's a foregone conclusion that somebody's gonna build an illegal apartment in the back and it's gonna get approved. Unfortunately, these illegal apartments have historically been approved here. I have not approved it myself.
I wasn't suggesting that down the road it would be approved or not approved. I
But that it
was just
would be
suggesting
built.
that it would be built and it would get back to life and it would be there.
Yeah.
That's all I was trying to bring up, and it just seemed to me, and this was all explained to me, this is your town, not my town. I come here occasionally, but I'm not here like, every week as you guys do. But it just seemed to me, just from a common sense kind of point of view, I'd rather see that to place sprinkler, something to comply with any kind of construction requirements that a 3-family would have, which I believe then has to be registered with the state also as a 3-family house, whereas a 2-family doesn't. And it just seemed to me to be a better way of doing it, considering the reality of what I'm gonna say is likely to happen, not by us, by the way. I'm I'm not suggesting we would do that. But we're gonna sell this. We don't have any control over it today. Now's the time that we have some control over it. Just thought it was better planning, that's all it really comes down to. If you disagree with us, then, you know, I understand you disagree.
But a realistic, I mean, a also could realistically be 2 nice 2 families and then have less of a variance need for parking, right? So it doesn't have to be constructed in this.
No, it doesn't
manner.
have to, but that's the explanation. I mean, we live in a part of the world where this is it's an everyday thing, this happens. You guys have been here listening to a whole bunch of variances or, for legalization of apartment. It does happen. And, do we live it to chance and, maybe find that somebody's been living there for 10 years before, they get caught with the third unit in an unsafe manner? Or just approve it now and do something that is safe, that it's, and I know we should mention this, with taxes and everything else.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, there's always alternatives. I say, don't approve the illegal apartments, set a precedent, and then down the road, West New York will actually turn into a better place, which is what most towns try to do, is go to the better instead of continue with the bad precedent. So we disagree on that point, but that's fine.
yes, we do.
Thank you for your explanation now.
Any more questions?
Just, I think I just wanted to get on record, from your last time you testified, you stated that the third unit will be marketed as not having parking available on the site.
That's correct.
That's the way we would still be moving forward with.
Oh, yeah, I think that was part of my explanation.
I thought it was, I just wanted to make sure, since we're not having the original
Yes.
testimony.
Right, definitely.
And also, do you have our engineering report for May 2014?
Well, we do, but I'm not the engineer, so.
I know, and it doesn't seem like there's an engineer who's going to testify. We did have some drainage comments,
Okay.
and
Do you need more information from our engineer?
more information on the plan and just, how we think this design calculation, to see which fits along those lines.
And maybe we can also handle it this way too.
We will comply
Counsel-
with whatever he needs.
That's the $100 question. Will the applicant comply with anything that's in the CME memorandum dated May 8th, 2014?
Yes, without intent to do
And will the applicant comply with anything that's in the Remington and Burnick memorandum dated April 16th, 2014?
that. Yes.
Okay. If the application is approved, obviously.
Okay. So we're gonna carry this over to.
We're gonna wait for
we gotta wait for the plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions?
Do you want to open it up to the public, Mr. Chairman? I don't think that's.
Is there anywhere from the public for this matter at
Doug Warden?
6012 12th Street?
Yeah.
Here comes up.
Hello, Albert, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Doug Warden, 6600 Boulevard East, Department 12G. Just wanted to say, the little dialogue that I just witnessed between Ms. Puerto and these developers really does shine a light onto the mindset of these developers and engineers and contractors that come into the city. They think it's a done deal. They know this is the way it is. It's easier to, not get the proper variances and just build it. And, it's easier to ask for forgiveness, as they would say in Puerto Rico, to get the correct variances. But the bottom line is these developers and these contractors, they come in with this mindset that this is what's going to sell. An illegal one apartment space is going to sell. So we just have to build it. We'll build it with all the good intentions, but we really know what's going to happen. So it's up to you guys as board members to put a stop to this before it happens. It's not, if we keep on building it like this, if we keep on allowing these variances like they're nothing, they will come. They will keep on coming. And they'll be imposing their will on the citizens of this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, excuse me, are you within 200 feet of this? I'm just curious.
No.
You didn't go.
I live in the town.
Oh, no, you don't.
Anyone else in the public that would like to come up? Not seeing anyone?
It's next week.
Mr. Carlbeck, the planner.
Yeah, we need to get those qualifications. Swear to the court.
For the testimony you're about to give, please don't give your
I do.
Just state your name.
David Carlbeck, Charlebach, 689 Maverick Boulevard, Jersey City.
Can you just give us a qualification since we have new board members?
Certainly, I have a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, and I have been for over 20 years. I previously qualified before this board on several occasions.
So we accepted the, that's,
Yes, I've been accepted as next board.
Mr. Harper,
no, go ahead.
I had asked you to take a look at this project here and to give us your opinion as to its viability in terms of the land use law and what variances it needs.
Yes, I have conducted that analysis.
Can you share with us your testimony?
Certainly. I think the first thing I'd like to do is introduce an exhibit, which, I don't know, this is the very first exhibit, correct?
I believe it is.
A1.
Do you want to mark the plan? You usually mark the plan.
If it's been provided to the board already, we don't need to mark it,
Okay,
so,
then this will be the first.
A1.
So let's call this A1. A1 is 3 sheets. The first sheet is a bird's eye view or an aerial photograph of the site and some of the surrounding areas. Sheet number 2 shows ground photos of the site, and sheet number 3 shows photographs of some of the surrounding land uses. So I'll pass these around. There should be plenty here. I'll just use this as a caveat, but this photograph is not very recent. It's probably a couple of years old. So it shows structures on the property which have since been raised and removed from the site. It does show that dwelling that existed. It also shows a row of garages that abut not only the rear property line, but the side property line, and those have been removed. It's a vacant lot right now. What this aerial also shows is a nice commingled pattern of development in terms of use, density, mass. This is not a homogeneous neighborhood. I'd like to call it a patchwork quilt of land uses. You can see directly across the street on Polk Street is a building that's labeled residential. Those are actually 3 buildings in a row at 6011, 6015, and 6019 Polk Street, directly opposite this site. Those are what I'm calling quadruplexes. Those are 4-family homes. Now they're on 50-foot by 100-foot lots, similar to this one, and they're 4-family. But I point them out because I believe in terms of the setbacks, the height, the massing, the building coverage, it's very similar to what's being proposed tonight. What else is on here is 6014 Polk Street. That directly abuts this site to the northeast. That is a 3-family home. There's an apartment building at the northwest corner of 60th Street in Polk, and I believe that is shown on sheet number 3. If you look at the bottom 2 photographs, you can see that apartment building. 6013 Madison Street, which actually abuts this property to the rear, and you can see that's also labeled residential on your aerial photograph. That is a 6-unit apartment building. I'm assuming the address is number 555 61st Street. That's on the corner of 61st and Polk. That has 3 mailboxes, so I'm going to assume that that building is also a 3-family dwelling. This property abuts a municipal garage at 6006-6008 Polk Street. That's classified in your tax records as a 4B property or an industrial property. So you can see this is really, like I said, not a homogeneous neighborhood. It does contain many multifamily homes in this particular area. Now, the architect described a proposal to brand-new three-family homes with two-car garages and a two-car width driveway. So there's a total of 4 spaces per three-family unit. I believe the architectural plan showed that 5 spaces are required where 4 are provided. You had mentioned, one of the board members had mentioned that 6 spaces were required according to the residential site improvement standards. I could find no parking standards in the RSIS for three-family homes. They talk about a variety of housing styles, but they don't specifically address three-family homes. So we're going to rely on the West New York standards only because they're local, and there's an understanding of what parking is available both on-street and in local parking garages. The ground floor contains garages and a single-bedroom unit. The upper floors each contain 3-bedroom units, and these units range in size from 869 square feet to 1,419 square feet. Now, this property is situated in the RM, which is the medium density residential district. This zone permits single-family and two-family homes. It does permit garden apartments and elevator apartments on much larger lots. I think a garden apartment requires 20,000 square feet, and a residential elevator building would require even more than that. This particular lot area is 5,000 square feet. So a D variance is required because what's being proposed is a three-family home in a zone that permits 2 families. There are some other C variances required. There's a rear yard setback variance. The requirement is 15 feet, and 13 feet is being provided. In this particular instance, I think what happened was the whole building was probably pushed back 2 feet to allow that 20-foot length of driveway space that cars would overhang onto the sidewalk. So it's a slightly reduced rear yard setback. But be mindful, what was on this property beforehand was a garage, and I believe it was a 5 or 6 car garage right up against that rear property line. It had no setback, so this is a vast improvement over what existed in the past. And as I stated earlier, the parking variance is required. It's deficient by 1 space per 3-bedroom unit. I think this application very much mirrors what's happening directly across the street. I mentioned those, what I'm calling quadplexes, and you can see them clearly on A1. It looks as if the building coverage is the same, the setbacks, the size of the structure. This is going to be very similar. The difference is those have more of like a 70s style architecture, and I think what's being proposed is more of a traditional style building than what exists directly across the street. Now, the statutory proofs for D variance is this. The applicant must first prove special reasons. And to satisfy the special reasons, an applicant must advance, or excuse me, the application must advance at least one of the fundamental purposes of zoning that's listed in the municipal land use law. That forms the basis for all planning in New Jersey. And I believe this application advances several important purposes of the land use law. One purpose is to provide a variety of uses according to need. And this use and the size of the units, I think, respond to market demand, particularly for new housing within urban settings. Providing new housing stock is a planning goal of virtually every urban community. Let me share with you some statistics I found in the recent master plan. It states that the majority of housing units in West New York are multifamily units. Approximately 76% of the housing units are contained in structures with 3 or more families. And it goes on to say a total of 9,672 units, or nearly 50% of all housing units, were built before 1949 and are thus more than 50 years old. So I think this vacant lot provides an excellent opportunity to infuse some new housing stock into this area. It's a supreme planning benefit. Purpose I of the land use law is to promote a desirable visual environment, and I think that goal is accomplished by getting rid of this older, obsolete building. I should say it's already removed. And replacing it with a new building with modern architectural features, new durable paving, new landscaping. I think it's going to have an immediate impact. It's a sprinkler building, and it's going to have an immediate impact on beautifying the streetscape. It's going to correct what I would characterize to be an unattractive void in the streetscape right now. Purpose K, the land use law, is to prevent environmental degradation by improper land use. And here we're concentrating development on a site that's clear of any environmental constraints. There's no steep slopes, no waters, no woods that have to be removed. And finally, purpose M of the land use laws regards the efficient use of land so as to lessen the cost of development. So by way of redeveloping a previously disturbed site, as opposed to new development on a site on the outskirts, we're really becoming more efficient. And that's a state planning goal also. The state development guide plan tells us what we should be doing is focusing development, or what I'm calling infill development, in areas that already have existing infrastructure. We're preventing urban sprawl. We don't want to keep building into the outskirts and extending utilities and extending roadways. We have a perfect opportunity here for infill development. In terms of negative criteria, an application must not cause substantial detriment to the public good or cause substantial impairment of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. And I don't believe there are any significant community impacts. In terms of public health, this intensity of use will not cause any substantial detrimental health effect. The proposed development will not be a significant generator of refuse, air pollution, or water pollution. In terms of public safety, again, the intensity of use will not cause any safety concerns. We don't have any serious police or security issues, fire or rescue issues, or any other safety flaws. Traffic generation will not result in unsafe turning movements onto the site or off of the site. In terms of the public welfare, I don't believe there's any detrimental nuisances accompanying this application. It's not going to interfere with the use and enjoyment of the surrounding properties in any way. It's certainly not going to be out of context with the surrounding environment, which I characterize as being mixed. It's not going to generate any excessive noise, vibration, odors, glare, dust, fumes, or any other noxious influences. It's completely benign from a planning perspective. In terms of public services, the intensity of use will not overburden public water, sewer, or utility systems. And as far as the neighborhood impact, as I said, it's not going to impede the privacy, use, or enjoyment of neighboring properties. It's not going to alter the character of the area, which is already mixed. And there are many examples of three-family homes right here in this neighborhood. Now, in terms of the C variances that are required, I stated that there was a 13-foot rear yard setback requirement, or excuse me, setback proposed as opposed to the 15 feet required. Now, this is what I consider to be a minor variance, a de minimis variance. We're talking about only 2 feet. The planning benefit that's achieved is you move the building further to the rear and you get that additional parking space, I think, which the town desires in the front of the building. This way the building doesn't crowd the street and you get sufficient room for parking a car on the driveway.
Which exceeds the setback, correct, in front?
Yes, it does. This application meets all of the setback requirements with the exception of that rear yard setback. I think the residential site improvement standards are overly broad. They really can't be applied to both a suburban area and an urban area and be accurate. It just can't occur that way. And that's exactly why the state defers to localities and said, well, if there are sufficient reasons for relaxing the site improvement standards, you're empowered to do so, certainly. And in this particular case, there are 2 very good reasons. Number one, there's a parking garage nearby that has spaces that are available. It's approximately 2 blocks away. And secondly, I'd like to think, as a planner, that somebody that occupies those smaller 1-bedroom units may not have a car. They're probably going to use a bus service that's available right on Bergen Line Avenue and commute to work, or maybe even work locally in town or take a bicycle. So not everybody that lives in town has a car, and the smaller the unit gets, the more likely that people are less, or I should say, more likely they're not going to own cars. So that's the hope and the expectation for this particular property, that 4 parking spaces will be sufficient. In terms of the master plan recognizes the demand for this type of housing in West New York. As I said, I think that this responds very well to the market demand right now. Good planning recognizes that land use is not meant to stand still, but it's constantly evolving and improving. And this neighborhood is evolving. I mean, there are some new buildings in this neighborhood, namely the ones right across the street. And what's being proposed really mirrors what's happening on the opposite side of the street. And if you look at this at A1, if you just look at the neighborhood, you can see the massing of the buildings, the variety of the buildings. It looks like they're all very similar in height, but difference in appearance, different architectural styles, and it is an evolving neighborhood. I think this fits very well within the overall context of the community. I really believe that it moves this site into harmony with the neighborhood. As I said, you're getting rid of an unattractive void, this big, I don't know, it looks like a gap in grandma's teeth right now. It's unattractive. I drive past it, and you're going to replace it with a new building, modern architectural treatments, new landscaping. It's really going to have quite a positive effect on this neighborhood. And I'm going to let these photographs speak for themselves. As I said, you can look at page 3 and see what exists directly across the street. Now, there's only 4 mailboxes on those buildings. I'm not convinced that those are only 4 family structures, quite possibly more. I looked at the tax records, and it listed them as 3 families, in other words, 3 families per half. So I don't know what to say. I actually interviewed one of the residents, and they said, no, it's a 4-family structure. So I'm going to go with that. But the point is, if you're into, say, form-based planning as opposed to traditional planning, yes, what's the difference whether it's 3-family or 2-family? The fact is, the living area, the amount of living area is constant. It's the same as what exists across the street. And as a planner, I tend not to measure density in terms of dwelling units per acre. That's not fair. A studio apartment is 1 dwelling unit. 5-bedroom house is 1 dwelling unit. So why don't we talk about terms of density in terms of dwelling units per acre? Let's talk about it in terms of bedrooms per acre. And I practically guarantee you, if you were to examine the density of this particular project in terms of bedrooms per acre, it would be very much consistent with what occurs in this neighborhood. That's just my judgment by driving around this area, getting familiar with what's in the area. I think the board should feel very comfortable in granting the D variance. It's really 1 bedroom in excess of what the ordinance permits. And that 1-bedroom unit is less than 900 square feet. The parking issue, I think, could be remedied easily. There's already 4 parking spaces proposed on site. If the need arose for an additional parking space, the resident can park 2 blocks away in a public parking garage and pay a very reasonable fee for that privilege. And as I said, the hope and the expectation is at least 1 dweller will use mass transportation, will not require a car. So this is not a significant departure from what the ordinance permits. I know in the past, we looked at some other projects in the RM zone that involved elevator buildings on lots that are small, much smaller than 40,000 square feet. And you get that increased density that far exceeds what would be permitted in the RM zone. That's clearly not what's happening here. It's not, it's not a significant departure from what the zoning allows, and it's certainly very much consistent with the density that's envisioned in this particular zone. I think it fits in very well with the fabric of the community, and I think the board should feel very comfortable in granting this D variance application.
May I ask one question? Sure. Mr. Carlbeck, when you testified on the purposes of zoning advanced, you mentioned purposes I, K, and M. Can you give me the letters on the others that you mentioned?
G, to provide a variety of uses according to need.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. On page 3, picture number 5, like you said, Those houses across the street, are they two families or three families?
As I said, I counted there are 4 mailboxes, okay? Now, that's a 50 by 100-foot lot, similar to ours. So that would have been a 2-family home and another 2-family home next to it, which would be 4 families. Now, I thought when I read through the county tax records, it indicated to me that they were 3 families. I can't say that with any certainty, because I did interview somebody as they left their building, and they assured me it's 4 families.
Okay. And also, right in the beginning of Polk Street, there's also, I believe it's two family homes. It might be the same style you're proposing to build.
Where are we talking?
Next to the, actually, you can see it on page 3, number 7. Left-hand side. Do you know if those are 2 or 3 family homes?
On number 7?
Yes, page 3. On the left-hand side, right next to the warehouse.
That's the municipal garage on the left-hand side.
No, you see the stairs?
Oh, you'd be beyond the municipal garage. Oh, yes, behind that municipal garage, those are, yeah, I think those are 2 family homes, yes.
Okay. I mean, the only reason I'm asking is because if you want to go with the style of homes, why wouldn't you go with a 2-family and use that first floor as storage for the apartments above?
Well, there's no planning reason why you couldn't build 2 two-family homes. You're correct about that, but I'm just going to tell the board what they already know. You know, every single application that comes before this board has an economic component, okay? So, I mean, that could be part of it also.
Okay, I just feel it would be better if we kept it at a 2-family and used the first floor as storage for each apartment. I mean,
I think what the architect.
and that way you wouldn't need, you know, a variance for the 2 extra parking that you're missing.
Right, they would actually apply for the building permit if they wanted to do 2-family homes.
Correct.
I think this is just an opportunity, as I said, to provide more housing opportunities in, you know, in dense urban environment. When you have as little new housing stock as you do in this town, it's just an opportunity for some people to secure new housing. It's sort of like the trickle-down theory. Somebody's gonna move out of their old apartment, move into a new apartment, their older apartment's gonna become available to somebody else that could not otherwise afford that, and it just, you know, creates this ripple effect where everybody sort of improves their situation by virtue of having this new housing. So that's really the planning rationale behind it. It just presents an opportunity for additional housing on a site that's large enough and capable of supporting those 2 additional units.
Okay, any other board members have any questions?
Yeah, did you want to continue?
No, I'm done.
I tend to agree with you, because it seems that it would be more consistent. There's 2-family houses, and then this would be the, you know, the larger, we can do the larger. I agree that a 2-family seems to make more sense. Do you happen to know, would this be a rent? Well, you don't know, right? It'll be developed and then it'll be sold. And we don't know if these are family-owned 2 families either across the street. Because now, I mean, I remember seeing these, and they look kind of nice, you know, across the street. May I ask, the reason for the use variance, is it because it's is it an industrial zone, or it's a medium density?
No, it's a medium density zone.
Okay.
So if you have a 5,000, or excuse me, if you have a 2,500 square foot lot, you will be permitted to build a 1 or 2 family.
Understood, okay.
So
I would go back to the master plan then, where we're talking about, you know, you have to prove, well, it doesn't significantly deviate from the master plan, which I would say it does, because back then, when the master plan was created, you know, they could have contemplated three-family homes just as easily, but they said no. For any, you know, you would have a 1 to a 2-family, so they clearly wanted no larger than a 2-family home in this area for some reason. The only thing I would ask is, do you know in the new master plan, is this area rezoned?
It is not.
Okay, so they maintained it to be medium density.
Well, they did, but the master plan goes on to make other comments. Other than putting this in the medium density land use category, it talks about protecting the integrity of single-family neighborhoods. And it gives very specific examples of where those single-family neighborhoods are. And it says we want to stop the intrusion of multifamily units in single-family neighborhoods. It doesn't say anything about this particular neighborhood, you know, being in a medium density area. So those recommendations about, you know, preventing higher density development in residential areas specifically are aimed at those low density residential areas.
Okay. But, and again, I'll just go back to the master plan was created, you know, for however it was created to maintain this for, you know, up to 2-family structures. They could have contemplated 3-family, but they did not. They specifically said no. Anything larger than that, you need a larger space, et cetera. Right? So, and one of the things also that we don't touch upon enough, I think, is when we talk about we need more housing. Well, we need new stock of housing. But again, new stock could be a perfectly lovely 2-family house. But the town is extremely over-congested. I think we live there, we live here. We know it's really over-congested with people. So that people may move around, that would be great. But that more people are attracted in, the larger the structures, that's not so great because we're already maxed out. As far as I'm concerned, and I live it every day with the transit, which has gotten increasingly worse. So I think that one of the things that our master plan had tried to do, and over the last couple of years, unsuccessfully because everything gets approved to be built, is to stop over congestion and to create open space and to have some green and parks. We've eliminated all of that because we keep building larger and larger structures. So at some point, when do we stop? You know, and that's just my take. I think that it does deviate from the master plan because we need more affordable housing. We don't necessarily need more housing for more people to come in. So that's just my.
Does any other board member have any comments, questions? Engineer?
One comment that I had is just, I have to refer back to our site, so I really do push on three-family homes.
I'm asking. Everybody has going to fill a 10-family house.
Right, so what I was saying is I believe that there is a requirement for three-family homes in the RSIS, but I also, the town has also reflected on local ordinance as well, in situations like this, but there is a section of that contains three-family homes and 12 spaces, what we would have. It's in our review letter, but the local ordinance does go to town. I just wanted to clarify that. That's it for me.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. I think one board member has spoken rather well in terms of your concerns. And if I could just put a little finer speak on what you were saying. When you approach an application like this, and we probably don't talk about this enough, the first thing that occurs to me is that the applicant, through his testimony, is trying to overcome the fact that the governing body has not permitted, has not found it necessary, whatever the right term is, to allow for what's being proposed in this location. And that's really a very significant challenge to overcome, because when you think about it, a governing body can change zoning virtually anytime they want to. But for one reason or another, they've not found it necessary to change the permitted uses in this RM zone to allow for that particular use. So as the applicant's planner started to step through his testimony, the first thing that was touched upon was special reasons, which is something that needs to be demonstrated anytime you're seeking use variance relief. And you really need to figure out in your own mind whether or not you feel that the reasons that were advanced were really special enough, for lack of a better term. I did not get them all down, but what I noted was that several of the special reasons or factors that would, in aggregate, constitute special reasons would also be appropriate to building development in accord with zoning. I know that there was mention of providing a desirable environment, which would result, presumably, if something were constructed that were in accord with zoning, the prevention of environmental constraints, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have the Cox compendium in front of me that I can just read them off to you.
George, do you want me to stop you real quick?
Sure.
You know, swear you in, or do you want to get sworn?
Oh, yeah, well, that would be good.
We're less of a question, more of a, so, ma'am, would you swear me?
The testimony you're about to give the truth, the truth, the truth.
Yes.
And anything you just said previously you would also say the same things under oath?
Yes. There was discussion about providing infill development where there is existing infrastructure. Of course, that would occur if you also had development that was in accord with local zoning. And also, in terms of demonstrating substantial detriment to the neighborhood, you know, the term substantial is what you really need to key in on. There is a mix of uses out there. I really don't know, you know, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, so to speak, it's awfully difficult to get it back in, but, you know, they can't create a substantial detriment to the neighborhood. You have to figure out what substantial is in your own mind. But some of the things that the planner indicated spoke to noise, vibration, those kinds of things, which are very typical concerns when you have, say, industrial or commercial development in proximity to residential development. So while it's technically a valid point, it would seem to me that those specific points relate more to a different type of development. I took the time today to, anticipating a use variance, I took the time today to take a look at the housing element of the new master plan to see if it would provide us with some guidance, and I really didn't see any there, quite frankly. So then I thought, well, let's take a look at the goals and objectives, the overarching goals and objectives of the master plan. And so I highlighted those. These goals and objectives are on page 5 of the master plan, just in the off chance you might have a copy. I noticed that one of the goals is to provide a broad range of housing choices, and the objectives under that overarching goal to help us get to that particular goal speaks to encouraging the construction of affordable housing. And there's only 2 listed here. The other encourage mixed use development where appropriate, such as along Bergen Line Avenue and on the waterfront. And that's all we have there in terms of overarching housing goal. I also noticed that there's a overarching goal of protecting and enhancing man-made resources. There are 3 objectives under that goal. One is to preserve unique architecture and historic landmarks. 2, improve deteriorated areas by removing unsightly or out-of-place structures and revitalizing the area. And 3, respect the scale of existing nearby housing. So that's really all the guidance that I could really find for what we're faced with. The one thing that I think would be good to have testimony on is the extent to which, because they have to demonstrate also that this is not inconsistent with the master plan, with the zoning ordinance. I think it would be good if we have some testimony from the applicant as to why this would not be inconsistent with the zoning ordinance. There has been some discussion on the master plan, but again, I'm trying to tell you that these are the type of things that you need to consider, and I think the board would be well served, and the applicant would be well served if you could elicit some testimony to demonstrate this is not inconsistent with the zoning ordinance. So to sum it up, our special reasons special enough. The applicant is overcoming the circumstance where the governing body has not seen fit to allow for this use in this location. I did not see much in the way of support for this in the master plan. And just the idea of being able to demonstrate that here we have or just to be able to demonstrate that the use is not inconsistent with the zoning ordinance. So, I think I've said no.
Thank you. Now, does any member of the audience have any questions, comments for Ms. Bennett?
You want him to
I'm sorry.
address what
Sorry.
there you go.
I'll address that comment. I just want to remind the board that this particular zone permits a variety of housing styles, single, 2-family homes, but it also permits garden apartments and elevator apartments. Elevator apartments are 12 stories in height. So imagine in your mind a single-family home next to a lot that happens to be 20,000 square feet or 40,000 square feet that supports a 12-story structure. Now, if I was in that single-family home, I'm thinking to myself, well, what would I rather have next to me? A 12-story apartment building or a 3-family home? All I'm saying is this zone recognizes and permits a variety of housing types, including 12-story buildings. That's not what's being proposed here. And I realize it's on a smaller lot, but if you're walking down the street, you're not recognizing that apartment building, that 12-story building that is on a 10,000 square foot lot. You just know it's a very large building in a otherwise single-family and 2-family residential neighborhood. I'm just going to emphasize, this zone permits a variety of housing styles. Okay? Now this is not a vast departure from what's already permitted. You could have a 2-family home with a duplex. In other words, you would have the garage on the ground floor, and then you would have living area on the first floor behind the garage. The owner would own the second floor duplex, and then you have a third floor of other units, okay? Is that a vast departure from what's being proposed? No. I mean, you could build a 2-family home that would essentially look identical to what's being proposed and what already exists in this neighborhood today. So what we're trying to avoid is a situation like the architect said, examples where people come in initially with a two-family home, and then they convert that garage space, or they convert that storage unit that was never approved as another bedroom. We're coming above board with a proposal for a three-family dwelling with sprinklers and other amenities. I just wanted to say that we talked about what is the test, what's the statutory criteria for the granting of this D variance. And we talked about substantial detriment to the public good. That's one prong. The other prong is substantial impairment of the zoning plan and zoning ordinance. You have to judge for yourself whether or not a three-family home versus a two-family home, which units would look virtually identical from the street, does that constitute substantial impairment? Now, I know what's gone on in town in the past, and I know some people find it objectionable, but this does not nearly compare with some of those other variances that we talked about earlier, not by a long shot.
May I ask a question? And so we touched on the substantial detriment, and then there's an and, that it will not impair the master plan, so it has to both. Okay? But there also, 31 has to be that special reason, and typically, which is special to this D1 use, right? And it's either, as my understanding, either the property is very narrow, and so this is the only thing you can build, or it's an inherently beneficial kind of a structure, or there's some other special, is it an undue hardship to the?
Well, no, I think, I'm gonna let your planner correct you, because I think what you're talking about is a C variance as it relates to bulk deviations or setback deviations. And the proofs that we're putting forth, the special reasons, bear no relationship to hardship.
Okay.
They're separate and apart.
So in terms of special reason, why this would, the applicant, or why this would not be considered originally in the master plan, and
Yes, and I agree with the comments of the applicant's planner. But that's not to say that someone wouldn't use the fact that you have some physical condition relating to the site that may be a special reason in and of itself. But,
Ms. Porter, if I may also, the special reasons advanced by the applicant are reasons listed in the MLUL, and what they offered was a variety of uses according to need, promote desirable visual environment, prevent environmental degradation, efficient use of land to decrease cost of development. Now, that's what they offered, and Mr. Stevenson pointed out that at least with some of those special reasons they've advanced, and he asked the question, are those special reasons special? And he asked a question which I would like to hear an answer to. I think. Promotion of a desirable visual environment, sure. You build a new building, it's a three-family house. You also build a new building, it's two families. And I think Mr. Stevenson pointed out some of those purposes could be both a conforming use and a non-conforming use.
okay. Oh, and I also wanted to just ask, when you mentioned the zone does permit garden apartments and 12 stories or larger structures, but what's the caveat to that? It's not, it has to have a 40,000 square lot, right? Or it has to have a much larger space.
Well, it's a much larger space, but the density that you could achieve in a 12-story apartment building on a 40,000 square foot lot would still far exceed, I believe what you would have here is 52 dwelling units per acre, something like that. You take 6 dwelling units and you spread it out over 5,000 square feet, that's about 52 dwelling units per acre. That elevator apartment that's 12 stories high is going to far exceed 52 dwelling units per acre.
Okay, no, and I understand that. It's just that it sounded almost as if, you know, I mean, you could have a 12-story as well. No, you can't. So it's not really accurate, I don't think to say, you know, it is zoned for that, but in a much different context. It has to be much.
I think, maybe I didn't make myself clear. I wasn't saying that that apartment building could occur at this site. I'm saying it could occur in this neighborhood, right in this neighborhood, right next to a single-family home. That does provide for that variety of land uses.
Any member of the audience would like to come up and ask this matter any questions? Or make comments?
Would you mind if my client says something first?
Yeah, let's swear him in.
Swear the testimony you're about to give will be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. May I have your name, there?
Giovanni Grazia.
Spell.
G-R-I-Z-A. Anyway, I work in town all the time. I got a couple of houses illegal, nothing is illegal. And I go run at the time. Yeah, I see on some spot, like my lot, or this lot, I see 12 unit, 10 unit, whatever it is. I think it's the way I have the lot is the same lot you prove almost every day, 10 or 12 units. And all I ask for two family house. I'm not asking for anything major, like everybody else come, 12 unit, 100 unit, 200 unit. All I ask is the minimum possible, I cannot. And you guys look like make a big deal out of it. I don't know why. If there's any reason, you told me why, it's okay. But now I gotta do, I gotta sell somebody else, I gotta come over here for 10 units. That's what you want? I think I ask the minimum possible, I cannot.
Just address Mr. Redmond's comments. And, I mean, it's, may I make a comment?
When you ask questions,
Wait. I'll wait.
Anyone else from the member of the audience would like to come up, make a question or comment? I don't see anyone.
So I believe the applicant is going to order transcripts.
Okay.
If I could just quickly say one minute, Summer.
Oh, please do.
I know you have a long night here. Basically, just so we're clear on this, the proposal that's put in front of you, it's a two-family house. It's just a two-family house. You can go in before the planning board, subdivide these lots, not showing any houses. Go in for a building permit, and you can build virtually very similar, maybe not identical to these houses, but it'll be square footage wise or whatever, it'll be very similar to this. The layouts will be the same. You'll end up with a room behind the garage, and it'll be a two-family house. It will not be built like a three-family house, it will not be registered with the state, it will not have sprinklers, okay? And then he will go ahead and sell these houses, and whatever happens from there, you guys and ladies know better than me what's gonna happen or what's not gonna happen. And what we thought was a better idea, without getting really complicated about this, the discussion is very relevant with the zoning ordinance and the land use ordinance. I understand that, I've been doing this a long time. But practically speaking, we just felt coming before you, straightforward, trying to build this thing with better construction, with the sprinkler system, registering the house, and calling it is what it's going to be, most likely, was a better zoning proposal, a better idea. In this particular neighborhood, considering everything that the plan has. So with that said, I would just like you to keep that in mind. And I thank you very much for your attention and your time. If there's nothing else to say, I'll order the transcripts, and
Thank you. And after everybody reads the transcript, the board will know that it's next week.
When is this being carried to? A date?
Depends on when we get the transcripts.
Okay.
It's not-
before we get onto the video, the Boulevard matter, we're gonna take a 10-minute break.
Yeah. Where do we want to? Where's our regular?
I'm actually gonna be away at the end of May.
23rd of April?
April 23rd.
Okay, we're gonna carry this over to April 23rd meeting.
And so this meeting will be carried to April 23rd, this room, this building, 6:30 PM, no further notice.
And now we're gonna take a 10-minute break. Excuse me, everyone. Excuse me. Ready to get started. Okay. We're continuing in the matter of application number 2014-07, of Meridian Boulevard LLC, for property located at 6609-15 Kennedy Boulevard East and 967th Street, Lot 2 and Lot 9 and 10. Applicant proposes to construct a new 13-story, 157 multi-family building and 160 off-street parking spaces. Hearings were held September 18, 2014, September 22nd, 2014, October 23rd, 2014, October 29, 2014, November 13, 2014, November 19, 2014, December 1st, 2014, and January 22nd, 2015. So I believe we're up to the part where taking comments.
Yes.
Audience?
Mr. Chair, it's public comments, and we're allowing public comments once per person to keep it so everybody gets a chance. We'll try to limit it to 10 minutes. The following people have already given comments. Brianna Bryce, Joshua Breakstone, Gloria Crayson, Linda Kellerman, Umberto Ortega, I apologize, Mr. Ortega, Patrick Cullen, and Dave Cronin.
Bryce and not Bryce for the first speaker?
I'm sorry?
Bryce Land?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bryceland.
No, she's not here today.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So there'll be no second. Okay, anyone like to come up?
Oh, yes.
Make some comments?
Oh, and just for the record, there's we have a quorum tonight, there's 4 of us. We're not voting tonight, so we don't need 5. And we'll order transcripts as well. Right. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, first one.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I will. Gabriel Fedorko, that's Fedorko, 6600 Boulevard East, West New York, New Jersey. Okay.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Oh, sure.
Mr. Chairman, before we start also, just a reminder that there's 10-minute limit.
Correct.
Proposed in the last hearing.
Correct. Trying to limit it to 10 minutes so everyone gets a chance. Okay, we'll do.
There were probably or have been many other proposals seeking many, perhaps even more variances and waivers than this proposal. However, I think that given this project, which seeks so many waivers and variances, is just too large and inappropriate for this particular site. It's too large and it poses many problems to the area. Personally, my west view will be obliterated. I enjoy, throughout the year, watching the magnificent skies and sunsets out of the distance from my balcony and the west-facing windows. This will be gone. I enjoyed watching the large trees display the changing seasons and watching them grow, which I have for the last 30 years. This view will become the view of the apartment across the street. My home will become cast in shadow at times. My view's gone, trees are gone. My bright apartment will now be darkened by new shadows. The traffic congestion on the boulevard and 67th Street will no doubt, at a minimum, become a nuisance and could probably pose a dangerous condition should there be any backups, in particular on 67th Street, given the steep slope and the narrowness of the roadway, especially during icy conditions. I find it hard to believe that the two vehicles will be able to easily navigate through the porte cochere, especially if a vehicle is parked for a drop-off or a delivery. Given the ingress and egress driveways with the turning lanes on the Boulevard East and the Boulevard East traffic, this will be exacerbated. Will the huge red letter M signage become a nesting place with pigeons? How will the sign be serviced? How will the lamps be replaced? I wonder. I don't know. With the loss of approximately 25 existing curbside and service station parking spaces, where will these vehicles go? Why would one design a building that casts shadows on so many nearby homes and on the Versailles pool? Why are you putting a building that will almost cast shadows as well on other buildings, as well as having it cast a shadow on its building? The Versailles will cast a shadow on your building. So we go from currently shadows cast on a few buildings to three buildings plus surrounding homes, mostly cast in shadow. I guess the applicant assumes that the county will approve the balconies projected over the public sidewalk right of way, since I did not see any alternative building elevations without balconies. What will the building look like without the balconies? I don't know. These are just a few of the detrimental effects that this project will have on our neighborhood. I respectfully request that this board carefully consider all of the detrimental effects that this project brings to the town of West New York and vote to reject this project as proposed. Thank you very much for your time.
Next.
Swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth.
Good evening. I'd like to repeat some of the testimony.
Joe, please use the mic.
Sorry. Basically, what this application comes down to is they want to squeeze as many people as possible into very limited space to make as much money as possible, all without regard for the laws, the zoning laws of the town of West New York, its people, aesthetics, and the quality of life in this town. And forgive me, I'm a bit discombobulated. I had a nightmare of a commute. There were no buses from Port Authority. We had the architect who says what a beautiful building it is, beautiful, elegant lines. Well, he's describing his own building, so take that for what it's worth. The traffic witness claims that 160 additional cars will not have any effect on traffic. That's just not credible. Even 50 additional cars on the already heavily trafficked Boulevard East will make a difference. Then we have the plan of Mr. McDonough. His two big things were clusters of high-rises and a step down from the Versailles. That's what he said, that was the crux of their planning. The nonsense about clusters of high-rises is completely at odds with the West New York zoning code. The purposes of the code include to provide adequate light and air and open space, to prevent the overcrowding of land or buildings, to avoid undue concentration of population, These clusters of high-rises that he talks about will do just the opposite. And that is, it's Article 1, Section 414.1 of the West New York Zoning Code. Another purpose of the code is to protect the environment from deleterious uses of land. So what are they doing? They're destroying 15 beautiful trees that are on those two properties. Beautiful, old, irreplaceable trees. And they're also destroying two perfectly good one-family homes. That Dado property in particular is huge, and it could be turned into a multi-family home. Instead, they just want to destroy it. The step down is also nonsense. The Versailles has been there for 50 years without a step down. We don't suddenly need one. And they talk as though there's only one choice here, either this building or the gas station, nothing in between. That lot calls for 3-story townhouses. That's what they should have there. Or even a 4 or 5-story apartment building, not a 13-story monstrosity that takes up 97% of the allotted space. If you look at the planner's report, and I hope everyone has read that carefully, you'll notice a lot of misstatements and misleading statements as well. Under site conditions on page 3, complete lack of landscaping on the gas station. That's true, but he makes no mention whatsoever, again, of the beautiful trees, the grass, the shrubs on the other two lots, not to mention the two houses. So he loves the clusters of high-rises, but doesn't care anything about the clusters of trees. Then he says under amenities, there's attractive signage. That's those gigantic red M's that they want to put shining in our faces, and those stupid banners. Tacky. That belongs in Coney Island, not on Boulevard East, which is one of the most beautiful stretches of real estate in northern New Jersey. And they want to cheapen it. And what's the purpose of all that signage? Free advertising. Mr. McDonough admitted that. It's just branding. It's all to give them free advertising. What are they giving back to this town for everything that they want? All these variances, all this free advertising. What are they giving back? Nothing. They'll even get a tax abatement, so we won't even get tax benefits. There's not even a square inch of property on there that can be used by the public. All of the amenities are going to go for the residents of the building. Nothing for the people of this town. The only one who's going to benefit from this is the developer and the people who work for him. Now, I'm not going to go through the variances because I know my time is limited, but you know they are huge and they are numerous. Over 20 variances and design waivers. And not little ones, but huge. You can read the report and you know there's nothing to justify granting all of these variances. Variances are supposed to be the exception, not the rule. You're not supposed to just rubber stamp every application that comes before you. And I hope some of you at least have taken the required course. And you should know that variances, again, are to be used very sparingly and only in extreme circumstances. And the developer is required to make showing that these variances can be overlooked because this building has other benefits and it meets other criteria. That's all in the planner's report. And again, there are a lot of misstatements in there. Oh, for example, he says one of the criteria is to provide housing for a growing population. West New York doesn't need any more population. We're already the third most densely populated town in the country. And he says also to provide for a variety of housing choices. What we need here is affordable housing, not so-called luxury. And the only thing luxurious about this is the rentals that they're charging. Because if you look at that abomination on Park Avenue at 61st Street, that'll give you an idea of the kind of construction we can expect from this building. It's cheap, it's falling apart, it's been in existence barely 2 years, They still don't have a certificate of occupancy because of all the things that are wrong with it. We can expect exactly the same. It's the same developer, same people. And then he says it's going to serve the public good by replacing the eyesore of the auto shop with this wonderful building. Well, it's also going to destroy all those beautiful trees. I'd rather look out on those trees, which I do. I paid for that view when I bought my apartment. I could have purchased an apartment on the second floor for less money, but I moved out of Manhattan because I wanted light and air, and I wanted a nice open view. So I see the sky and the clouds and the sunset, and I take pictures galore because that pleases me. And I don't want to lose that because of some greedy developer. There are alternatives to that building. They should put something that comports with the zoning law and that fits in with the tenor of the neighborhood. Oh, and then he says also, it makes efficient use of land because they're supposed to build up, not out. Well, this goes up and out. If it were any more out, it would be right in the middle of the street. It takes up 90%, 97% of the lot. How much more out could it be? Oh, and then he says that this building will not block any views that are not already blocked by the facade. That's an out-and-out false statement. All those houses on McKinley Place have views. They have diagonal views of Manhattan and the river. And those are going to be blocked by this building. Also, Halifax Hall, just to the north. They have spectacular views looking south towards Manhattan. Those buildings, those views are going to be lost. And they make no mention whatsoever about the views from the facade. The views I mentioned, the sky, the sunset, the clouds. Those are lovely views, those beautiful trees. That's all going to be destroyed. Why? So Mr. Capodaglio can make a lot of money. Okay, and at least 90 to 100 homeowners right in the Versailles are going to be directly affected by this and negatively affected. And picture 100 single-family homes being affected like this. It's no different. These are our homes. The biggest investment anyone makes in his or her life is that person's home. Whether it's in an apartment, in a co-op, or a single-family home. And we have a right to have our values, our investments protected. We have a right to expect that the laws of our town are going to be enforced. Not that some developer who contributes to politicians in the town is going to get everything he wants. And we know how things work in this town. Don't let yourself be sucked into that. Nothing at all about this building comports with the zoning laws. And again, what are they giving back to the community? Nothing. So please don't just rubber stamp this. And when you vote, if you're planning to vote yes, please give reasons in the context of the zoning laws and the law as you know it, as I hope you have learned it. And don't just say, I find that the developer has met his burden. Give reasons why. Just saying, I find he's met his burden doesn't mean anything. That's a conclusion. Give facts to support your conclusions. And if you can't do that, if you're unable to support your opinion, then please do the right thing and vote no. Thank you.
Next person.
What's the name?
Hadar from the Halifax Hall, 6701 Boulevard East.
The last name is Harel. First name is Hadar.
I'm going to skip all the variances. I think that the previous lady did an excellent job with those, so I'll keep it short here. All right, Mr. Chairman, zoning board members, after sitting for numerous hours listening to the testimonials, I have not heard even one valid reason why this building is of benefit to the neighborhood and the residents. Continuation to what was said before me here. I really didn't see any reason why I'd support you guys. We are all residents of West New York. I have yet to hear why the zoning board should approve the construction of a building that does not fit the character of the neighborhood in any way, especially not its design, which might be great in South Beach, Miami, or Hollywood, Florida, but definitely not along the beautiful brownstone buildings of Boulevard East. Basically to the whole area here, the whole West New York area. All I've heard so far is how it will benefit the owner and the builders, and the people that will work there, of course. It is clear that it will only create a drastic decline in the quality of life of the surrounding residents, as well as decline in property value of the properties that are going to be affected to the north, east, west, and south of the location. Definitely to the west as well. It will, no doubt, put neighbors' properties in darkness, create more congestion, and catastrophic parking that as it is unbearable. I invite each board member to a little experiment. Better before you make your final decision about the matter. Try to find street parking at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. on a weekday around the location. We're all sharing the same frustration. Now, imagine 13 less street parking spaces that the building will take away, both 67th Street and Boulevard East. And this is not even including the 22 parking spots on location, meaning altogether 35 spots gone. And this is before the friends of those new neighbors are going to come and look for their parking. Now, when you took all these parking spots, now look for parking at 7, 8, or 9 p.m. Good luck. And this without, of course, all those guests that I mentioned. By the way, I have a question here. Did you come here by car? Because you know, most of us, especially my fellow Halifax Hall, we walked here. You know why? Because if we'll take the car, we know we're not going to have parking on the way back. So we walked here. You know, we walked here to meetings during rain, snow, whatever it is, we had to walk here. So think about this when approving so many more in that area. On another note, dear board members, did you find any purpose to this huge glaring red M on front of the building besides showing off the owner's ego? Because I didn't. Let's talk about the length of time it will take to build a South Beach, Miami style building. Estimate about at least 2 years, on a good case. I haven't heard any of the experts talking about the impact and the lengthy construction time it will cause to our lives here. Besides, of course, noise disruption, dirt, but definitely traffic disruption to the point of real danger. Real danger to a very narrow, if not the narrowest part of Boulevard East, in a place where numerous accidents happen. Is anyone going to take responsibility for, God forbid, those others that might cause? And of course, again, parking, parking, parking. It's going to be a mess, in short. There is a very good reason why today's zoning guidelines, there are of up to 3 stories allowed. Safety is a major one of them, for sure. So in closing, I ask the board members, as fellow West New York residents, when you're about to decide your vote, ask yourself, would you, and you, and you, and you, would you allow to build such a building next to where you live? Would you allow it to be in front of you? Would you like to see this huge M in front of your face every day? Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Bush. You have heard the presentation of the proposed development, Meridian Boulevard, by the experts that were hired by the developer. Architect, traffic engineer, planner, building engineer were all hired by the developer, so please keep that in mind when you make your decision. Today you are hearing the voices of the local residents. I am a local resident who is directly affected by this proposal. As a local resident, I experience on a daily basis the traffic situation, the parking crisis, the overcrowded buses, the huge line at Port Authority, etc., etc. As a local resident, I understand firsthand all the negative impacts this project would have on the neighborhood because I live here. I would like to begin my comments by quickly referring to the first images presented before this board by the architect, Mr. Arinsibia. Those images were aerial view, if you remember, if you recall, from Google Maps. And that's how they presented the location to us all. Well, by looking at rooftops, it is impossible to get an idea about how the Meridian building would integrate itself in the neighborhood. Those images were not clear. They had dark shadows masking important details in the area. Remember our chairman of the board, Mr. Kenneth Blaine at the time, asked the architect, and I quote, "What is that dark area next to the Versailles?" He was pointing at the image, of course. "It's not landscape or anything like that." The architect's response was simply no. Well, here is a different photograph of that dark area, and I would like to present it to the board. I took this photograph myself. I'm going to show it to you, of course.
We'll let Mr. Alonso look at it.
I took it from my apartment window.
Ms. Brixton,
Yes.
I have to ask you a couple of questions. You took the photo?
I took the photo back in September. The date is on.
Okay, the date is?
Is on the photograph.
Okay. Can you read it for me?
Sure.
The date of the photograph?
September 21st, 2014.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So it's photographed by myself on that date, showing the entrance of the Versailles with setbacks.
It's gonna mark it as 09.
09. Ma'am, we're gonna, if you
09.
write, you need a pen. Can you write 09 on that, please?
Sure. Okay. Okay, so I was saying it's just showing the entrance of the Versailles with setbacks, landscaped with trees. Now remember, when they first showed you that photograph from Google Maps, they told you there's nothing in that dark area. Well, this is what's in that dark area. It's beautifully landscaped in an area called a setback. This is in front of the Versailles. There are 14 huge trees. This is what it looks like when you have setbacks. This is what it looks like when you have vegetation. And it feels really good to walk on that sidewalk under those trees. Now keep that in mind because they're proposing zero landscape, zero tree, zero setbacks. That means that the building is going to be at the very edge of the sidewalk. Not only that, but their balconies are going to be over the sidewalks. So not only they don't have setbacks, they're overstepping into the public space. So that's one thing. All right, so one second. So,
Ma'am,
yes.
when you're done with that, can you give
Yes,
that
oh,
photo
I'm sorry.
to Ms. Varela?
Okay. So when you start to look at the neighborhood at ground level, all of a sudden it looks a little bit more different. You have a different understanding than when you look at a photograph from Google Map, a satellite view. Okay. Place yourself at ground level, look at the neighborhood, you'll see some, you see the surrounding architecture. And from the description you heard before by, my neighbors right there, and you've seen the renderings yourself, this building that they're proposing is going to be quite flashy. We're talking about big red hands on top, at the bottom, on the sides, lit. We're talking about blue facade. We're talking about dramatic lighting. I mean, you've heard their example. My example is more like a casino hotel in Las Vegas. But they all say the same thing. Now, if you look at the neighborhood, may I introduce another image? Same thing. This one and this one. I also took those photographs myself. I believe it was, if not the same day, the day after, back in September. Thank you. Okay.
Which one are you going to mark?
Whatever you want. The first one is going to be them 10. And 11 for the following one. Right. Yes, 10 is Halifax and 11 is 6601. So, I don't have 3 hands, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to try to talk really loud. Remember what their rendering looked like, okay, of that building that they're proposing. Now, it's going to be framed by these 2 buildings. This one to the north, 6-story building, Halifax Hall. It used to be the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, very discreet, very classic. And this one to the left, a little 5-story building, very discreet. Okay. And in between these 2, you're gonna have a 13-story building with big neon lights, etc., etc. Thank you. Okay. I want to go on with a question I had asked Mr. Arun Sivia back a few months ago. I asked the architect, why the large red neon sign on top of the building? Why? Why do you want that? And his answer was one word: marketing. Marketing. Well, this is a residential area. It's not a commercial one. We don't have building on Boulevard East that are trying to sell us a product. This is not Times Square with neon lights flashing for advertisement like H&M. This is not Boulevard East. But in that answer, their intention is completely revealed. All they really want to make is money. Marketing, marketing, marketing. And for that purpose, they seem to really not care about the numerous negative impacts this building would have on an entire neighborhood. They really don't seem to care about not having setbacks to protect the light, the air from flowing through, to reduce the invasion of privacy to the neighboring building. For example, this building that they're proposing is only going to be like 30 feet away, 30 to 40 feet away from this building, which means that the windows are going to be directly into our windows. No more privacy. They really don't seem to care about not having setbacks that would prevent clogging in case of an emergency so that fire trucks can have an easy access. It's very important. They don't seem to care about having balconies hanging over the sidewalk, a great potential danger for the people who are walking under. They don't seem to care about having a loading zone on 67th Street, directly across from a fire hydrant. 67th Street, which is, by the way, used as an emergency route for fire trucks. They don't seem to care about not having enough parking spaces for their 157 units. They need 193 spaces. They have only 160, that means they are short 33 parking spaces, plus I counted from my window a little more than you, Adar. I counted another 40 cars that are right now parking on that lot at night. So that means you're gonna have another like 70 cars on the streets. Just think about it for a second. They really don't seem to care about the overcrowded buses, the huge lines at Port Authority, and they really don't seem to care about not offering affordable housing, because they're about marketing. They really don't seem to care about the shadow that will be cast along the surrounding buildings at different time all day, all year round. They really don't seem to care about the drastically increasing the local population with a project that has a density, of 335 units per acre in an area that is limited to 80. That's more than four times the requirement of our zoning code. And this, again, in the third most densely populated town in the United States. They really don't seem to care about imposing their architectural style, a style that does not integrate itself in the neighborhood. We would love to see something else instead of the auto repair. We've said it before, but how about something that would be in keeping with the neighborhood? Something that would show concern about the desperate parking situation? This is not impossible, this is possible. This is like working with the community, this is working with the neighborhood, this is working with the resident of this town. Build something that would protect the existing vegetation, the space, the light, the privacy of its residents. If they don't care about any of this, then, dear members of this board, we certainly hope that you do, and that you will be voting no against this application, and in full respect and honor of the zoning code of our town, and in full respect of its residents. Thank you very much.
Cheryl James, 6600 Boulevard East.
Can you spell your last name? James?
James. Yes. Do you hear me or I need this? I need this with it. I am opposed to the Meridia project on Boulevard East in West New York. I understand that approximately 20 or more variances are being requested to circumvent the zoning ordinances in our town, ordinances which have been put into place to protect us, you, me, all residents, and preserve all of us, our quality of life. By casting hundreds of residents' apartments into shadow, taking away our beautiful sunsets, aggravating an already critical parking situation, public transportation system, our quality of life is not being preserved. By destroying the character of a beautiful residential neighborhood, well established, with a garish 13-story building, our quality of life is not being preserved. By having a red illuminated 8x11 letter M directly shining into the apartment of so many residents, surely their quality of life is not being protected. The Meridia will create a canyon effect, which will increase wind speed. It will drop temperatures significantly in the wintertime, not allowing for snow and ice to melt, hazardous at the very least. It will impact adversely our air quality. It will interfere with radio signals, directly affecting our first responders. Property values, let's talk about property values. Anyone looking for a sunny pool? Well, don't come to the Versailles. Anyone looking for beautiful sunsets? Halifax will, many of you, you're not going to sell your units as well as the Versailles. Anyone looking for a sound investment is no doubt going to think twice before buying in any of these two residences. Per an Oprah request dated
March of this year, there are numerous violations from the Meridian on Park Avenue that are unaccounted for and not fixed. This is a new residence. Now you're going to take an apartment complex like this one, identical, increase the size many times. How could you even think about that? They can't even fix these violations. Anyone can get these.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to
Yes.
object to that because those are violations which are allegations, subject to the client, the builder's right to go to municipal court, challenge them, abate them, or whatever. Just because violations are written doesn't mean that they're factual, that they exist.
Well,
I think it's prejudicial, and I don't think it should be permitted in this application.
well,
Madam Mayor, why don't we move on from that portion?
okay, well, I just wanted to throw that out there, but for these reasons, I'm asking you, please preserve our quality of life. Preserve Boulevard East. Most of you live here. You live here. Just do the right thing and vote against this. Thank you.
You speak the truth.
Whether smoke or fire.
State name and your accent.
Jonathan Evans, 6600 Boulevard East, apartment 2B.
Sorry, your last name, Evans?
Evans.
Evans, okay. I just have trouble hearing from, you're looking at her.
First, I'd like to ask a question about process and procedure. My understanding is that this is an open session for residents to be able to speak about the project. I don't understand why a lawyer gets to actually challenge what we have to say. Whether the facts may be deliberated, but every time we spoke facts, or the presenter spoke facts, Mr. Blaine would say, we're aware, we're going to take whatever you say into consideration and act accordingly. I think, in all fairness to the residents of this city, I don't think it's fair for them to be challenged. Nobody's coming up here to egregiously misstate the truth. And if in fact they're wrong, then you guys have to deliberate who's right and who's wrong. And you've heard plenty of testimony from both sides that you need to deliberate on. So that's just a question about the legal right of actually being able to speak freely in a public setting. What I really want to talk about is sort of a step back. I've spoken here before, but I actually do have a planning background and worked in redevelopment planning in Los Angeles. And what I was taught when I was learning my job was that to sit on a board like this, you're actually acting for the residents of the city. You're our neighbors. I don't know your names, you know our names. And unfortunately, these things, because of the history of the presentation of these types of projects, have become contentious from the get-go. I find that unfortunate and not forward-thinking in terms of where the city is going and how it should actually look at development so that everybody in this town can actually benefit from development. Development's a good thing. At the end of the day, they're usually negotiated. There's usually people win aspects of a project and they lose aspects of a project. What's discouraging here is the cynicism with which a project of this type was expecting to actually come through with an egregious amount of mistrust and excessive number of variances, it's unheard of, that there was no notion on the part of the designers, the engineers, the property owners, the lawyers, that in fact they could have come with a project that was a little bit more reasonable and we could have been having a very different conversation. Instead, we've taken years and we're at a place where the offensive nature of this project, the height, no setbacks, the sign, which to me is a red herring because they can say, well, we'll take the sign off. So, okay, the sign goes. But the thought that that actually belonged on Boulevard East is an outrageous misreading of the urban context of Boulevard East. Now, Boulevard East isn't a perfect street, but it actually manages to be an eclectic, changing main street of it's West New York's main street. It's got a real role to play in this town because it actually bridges two different parts of a very bifurcated community. There's a whole town down below that has no real connection to the rest of us. There's Boulevard East, and there's a city to the west. So the preservation of Boulevard East, the fact that it's got a park, it's got recreation, it's got landscape, it doesn't have buildings that are as frontal, as bold, and as aggressive on the street as this building proposes to be. And I think also that you have to look at the Park Avenue building as an example, and I actually want to say I hope that you guys have looked at it up, have actually seen that there probably would be some things that you might not approve now, but I drive past there several times a week because I'm out in the community and I use the swimming pool, and it's so contextless. There's a jump in scales. There's a gaping black hole of a garage right at street level. There's buttresses that are fake, totally false, ornamental things that actually are big and aggressive and overpower the smaller scale of the buildings on the street. And it doesn't connect to anything of its neighbors. It's really out of place. Similarly, this proposed project misses on a couple of key points. It's not contextualized. My colleagues, my neighbors, my friends have spoken in great detail about those things. I'm not going to speak to them again. But what I do want to say is, being on a board like this is a matter of trust. People are coming to you and asking for favors. They're asking to build a project that in no way suits the existing zoning laws. Now, it's not to say that variances aren't granted, and there may be reasons to grant it, but like Joan and several others have said, what are we getting back from this project? We're actually destroying the flow of the boulevard. We're creating, to overhang the sidewalk when you've got no setbacks, is adding insult to injury, actually, and it's completely inappropriate. The sign, I'm going to say that they're going to say, all right, forget the sign. I'm not even going to talk about how off base the sign is. It's off base on Park Avenue. It's way, way off base on Boulevard East. You're our representatives here. You guys are negotiating the difference, the distance, and the differences between a development proposal and the needs and aspirations for those of us who live in a community that want a certain quality of life. That's a really serious responsibility. And I think it absolutely has to be looked at that way. That we're horse trading here. You're horse trading. You're going to give profits and you're going to give whatever to somebody, but you're taking something away from the residents, and this project isn't giving anything back. We've been very clear about how it doesn't, and you gotta honor your responsibility. It's a big one. I think as we move forward, as there's more projects, I think there's a better project. We can up the bar in this town. I think we have to up the bar in this town. And I think it's working together with the community, with developers who have a more enlightened notion of how they're going to work with the town and its residents, how they can't take this for granted anymore, is really, really important. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Short, but not so sweet. I strongly object to this proposed building design. It's way too big, it is too dense, and it is stylistically incompatible with the neighborhood buildings. Zoning laws were put in place for a good reason. And if the board grants a developer 20 variances for a project like this, that sends a signal that West New York is for sale. Come here, you can build whatever you want. I'm not against development, but I do object to overdevelopment, and the proposed building design should not be approved. Thank you.
Virginia Kelly, 11H on the other side. Virginia Kelly, K-E-L-L? Yeah, right. Why? And the address again, please? 11H on the other side.
I recently moved from Williamsburg, Brooklyn, escaping the madness of development. Not development, but the madness. And I've seen this scenario before where an inappropriate project managed to get its way, and it changed the whole makeup of the town. Now, I just made the biggest investment of my life in views, in sun, and in pool. And all of that is going to be wiped out with this. Now, I feel like if somebody else is making money on my investment, that I'm going to be robbed. Now, I was told that something was going to be built there. Now, I look around and I see 6, 7-story high. I'm thinking, no problem, I'm on the 11th floor. And then when I saw the picture of the building, as someone said before, the first thing that came to mind is Miami Beach without the beach. And on top of that, if a red light is gonna come through my window at night, I'm planning to buy a couple of flashlights, moving flashlights, into that building, only for one word, vengeance.
Peggy Wong, 8550 Boulevard East, North Bergen, New Jersey. This copy, I'll try and make some changes. I live exactly 1 mile from this development, and I am a lifelong resident of Hudson County. I basically grew up here. I actually graduated from West New York Memorial High School. That school, and through its art director, Fabian Ciccone, launched me on my career in interior design. If it wasn't for him, I would not have had this career. That career took me into development, so I have the greatest degree of respect for developers. I've worked on very large-scale projects in the multi-million dollars. The most expensive project I've worked on is probably roughly $120 million. They're all hotel projects of 4 or 5-star quality, and I've had reason to interview architects and interior designers for our projects, and I have to say that this project, the way it's been designed, and the arrogance of abusing your variances and your zoning codes is despicable. I will say to you that what it tells me, because as in hiring architects and interior designers, you have to understand the way they work. And when I look at this project and I see the 20 variances that are enormous, it tells me 2 things. Actually, it tells me 3 things. First, the architect has no conception of how to work within the zoning code. Secondly, there is a certain amount of greed that's involved here. Greed that causes the 20 variances. Thirdly, and more despicably, there seems to be an attempt to undermine the whole concept of your zoning code. It's totally ignoring it. It's taking advantage of it. And I would hope that you would not approve a lot of these changes that are being requested. And I think the most egregious one is the one that involves the density. Your zoning code allows for 80 units per acre. This design pumps it up to 292 units per acre. That's roughly 3.5 to 4 times what's permitted. What I just said to you is impromptu, so I'm going to call back to my written statement, but I just, listening to all the comments here, many of the comments are very spot on. Joan made some very good points. And what I have to say is a little more general in tone. If constructed as presently designed, the Meridian development, that is an enormous development, will have a significant negative impact on the neighborhood that is mostly low-rise homes and will impact the surrounding towns. And I only live a mile away from here. Its location on a heavily trafficked Boulevard East, the county road goes north-south through 5 towns, ending at the approach to Lincoln Tunnel. For a development to request over 20 variances, many of which are D variances, is indicative of either the overwhelming greed, as I said, or a lack of planning skills to design and develop within the limits imposed by the West New York regulations and ordinances that have been put in place over many years and improved upon by public input. And again, this speaks to a lack of skill on the part of an architect. And I've worked with architects who are very skillful in working around things, and it's amazing to see how they can adjust their designs, not requiring all these variances. One D variance, because that jumps out, and as I said, it's the request for 292 units per acre. That is like the equivalent of a person who wears, let's say, an 18 shirt, squeezing themselves into a size 12 shirt. It's absurd. And I hope you would recognize this and not approve this, this application on that basis. I firmly support the developer's right to develop this property, but not with these excessive 20 variances that will harm the fabric of this neighborhood and nearby residences. Certainly, the shadow study has shown the Meridian will cast a shadow on Boulevard East, unlike any other location on this stretch of Broadway, known for its magnificent views of the river and New York City skyline. These views add value to living in West New York and Hudson County. You cannot discount that. People come from all over the country to live in this area because of the views of the river and New York skyline. These views add value, as I said, add value to West New York and Hudson County, but this design brings to mind the Upper West Side of Manhattan with its canyon of high-rises. Those residents never see sunlight for any length of time. The Meridian development is located within one of the most densely populated towns in New Jersey. It is also in an area that has serious flaws in its transportation services and infrastructure, and this will only worsen in the years ahead, according to a Rutgers University study. And we also heard tonight of one of the members of the audience having trouble commuting back to New Jersey from New York through the through Lincoln Tunnel and the Port Authority bus station. There's a problem with the buses there. This is only a minor speck in the daily problems of commuting back and forth to New York. At one point, when I was working steadily in New York, I could count on being able to leave my apartment and be in New York within half an hour. And within 15 minutes, I'd be over on the east side at my office. Nowadays, that time frame is out the window. I hear horror stories about people coming and going to New York and taking hours, and especially coming home. Now that's going to just be worsened by developments such as this, which is overscaled and is too large for this area. It's just going to add to our problems with traffic and parking, of which you have heard a lot of comments here tonight about parking. There was a study issued by the Rutgers University in September 30, 2014, of an unparalleled population shift away from the suburbs of New Jersey and into the urban areas, and Hudson County was mentioned specifically. James Hughes, the dean at the school, was quoted as saying there are full structural transformations going on. We're seeing a rebirth in urban areas, which is to say that people are now moving away from the suburbs and back to the urban areas. You're right in the spotlight of it all, and certainly with this development, I'm sure that it will attract your share of the population shift. But are you ready for it? Is Boulevard East ready for it? Are you planning on widening it? You're not, because you can't. So what do? You allow your residents to suffer with the buildup of traffic. If that's what you're willing to do, then I would suggest to you that as a zoning board, you're not fulfilling your obligations to the community, because you're supposed to stop things like this from happening and making the quality of life in this town worse than it is now. At the least, this development should be reduced so that its parking, including an allowance for guest parking, at least equals the number of apartment units. Right now, the current design is 33 parking spots short of what's required, which is to say that these 33, hypothetically, 33 cars would be out there on Boulevard East circling, trying to find a parking space at night. And I've attempted to come and visit friends in West New York, and I've circled the blocks, and I finally gave up and went home. This is slowly but surely, this area is getting the reputation of being like Hoboken. You don't go down there with your car. And that's not a way for a town to grow, because New Jersey, basically, in the end, is car oriented. But if you're responsible for people to park there, what's going to happen? If this board approves this application along with its excessive 20 variances, you are ignoring your responsibility in community service and your purpose in serving on this board. You are expected to discourage developments of this magnitude and the harm it will do to your community and the quality of life for your residents. I urge your voting members to wake up to their responsibilities and vote against development as designed, because the effects of this will be immediate. When this building goes up, people move in, and there is a scarcity of parking in this neighborhood already. Will you be there to help people find parking spaces? I suspect not. You can stay sitting on this board here and turn your heads away. But in the meantime, the people out there, those who you are supposed to serve, are going to be suffering. And I would encourage you to do something about this by having this developer go back to the drawing board and redesign this project. As I said, I'm not opposed to his developing. He has every right to develop. But there's got to be a responsibility here, because in the end, this town will be suffering. Thank you.
I do. It's Bill Lamonte, VOLONTE, 6600 Boulevard East, apartment 7D is in David, in West New York, New Jersey. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I come here tonight as an objector, speaking out against this project for which a variance is sought from the planning board's zoning process here. The developer wishes to put in a large 13-story building in a neighborhood that is perhaps unique here in Hudson County. Boulevard East is a fairly quiet residential neighborhood that consists primarily of single-family homes that are owned by owners. There are a few apartment buildings there where the people are either owners as condominiums, or they're shareholders in a cooperative association. The neighborhood basically has quiet people here. It has people who have families, it has people who have children, it has older people who are retired, and people sort of walk around and do their thing on Boulevard East. Here comes now a 13-story project of rental units. Well, who lives in rental apartments in Hudson County? Well, it's more likely to be transient people. People who don't have families, people who are here for a year or two and they're going to be leaving. And it's going to inject in our neighborhood a population that is really inconsistent with the population that is in the surrounding area. And the issue really is that even the houses further in are basically single-family homes. You don't see for sale signs on Boulevard East very often. People stay there and live, and then they transfer the house when they pass on. So this is an important issue. I'm not even certain who really is going to rent here. This is not really Hoboken where you can go out and have a beer at 1 o'clock in the morning. This is really a quiet, almost semi-suburban area in an urban area. And if you want to have a brewski, I guess you can go over to the bar that's in the Galaxy or go to the one on Park Avenue. But thank heavens that's not the population that we have here. So we have a two-pronged issue that we're facing in this regard. A, who's really going to want to live here? B, if folks come in who are younger, the 20-somethings that seem to populate Hoboken, they may want to transform the community into a more Hoboken-esque community that I don't think that the majority of people who live in this area want to have any involvement with. Another issue that we have to look at, there are towns in northern New Jersey where there is a single-family home, and there's a high-rise next to it. And then there's a single-family home and a few single-family homes. Then another high-rise next to it. Everybody likes going to Fort Lee, but have you ever driven through there? It looks like bad teeth. You know, there's a tooth and there's a missing tooth. I don't think we necessarily want West New York to take on that low teeth. West New York basically is composed of a few buildings that are large and then smaller single-family places. If you want to have a more multi-dwelling unit, yes, you can put in multiple families. The application before us was for a 3-family home. That appears to be consistent with the Boulevard East neighborhood. Recently, we had the 7-Eleven built on Park Avenue. Long time there was the auto repair store. Very friendly gentleman owned it. He was a very honest mechanic, decided to retire. We now have a 7-Eleven there. It's perfectly consistent with that area. It's a commercial area. You have a 1-story building. It fits in. You don't have a 13-story building with a 7-Eleven on the first floor. Now, let's look at traffic. Although Boulevard East is a fairly peaceable, crime-free community, the traffic ain't so peaceable, okay? Anybody who's walked along there with a child, I have a 7-year-old child, is afraid that something's going to happen. The child is going to dart out and get hit by something. If you add 160 parking units to this little corner that's tucked in there with the river and the cliff over there, where is this traffic going to go? It's just going to add a great deal of unnecessary congestion, and it's going to start us on a slippery slope of transforming what is almost a semi-suburban community, tree-lined, into something that is much, much more car-oriented, and I think people mentioned Miami Beach. Let's look at the lighting question here. Now, do we really need an M on Boulevard East? Is this the MetLife Stadium Redux? No. Does anybody see a light advertising your business on Boulevard East? Well, the 7-Eleven has a little thing at Park Avenue, and the auto guy had a little thing there. There's a guy down the street that sells liquor and potato chips. He's got a little sign there. That's consistent with a neighborhood. And from a legal point of view, if you shine a light into a residential neighborhood, it is a nuisance. It is an unreasonable interference with the use and enjoyment of property. So what do? You have to go to the Chancery Division and get a prohibitory injunction to stop this from going on. But let's take this back from the lighting issue, okay? The fact that they could even think of putting a big light in this neighborhood reveals what the true motive is for this project. It's there to squeeze as many units into a small place as possible to maximize as much profit as possible. I have nothing against the profit motive. This is America. We all want to make profit in this country. But making money has to be consistent with the goals and needs of the community. To put a 13-story building into this neighborhood is entirely inconsistent with the neighborhood. It's entirely inconsistent with the needs of the people in this area, and indeed the people in the entire town of West New York. Going to one slightly larger issue, one problem in New Jersey is that there has never been any type of regional plan to control and limit growth in our very developed state. Unless you take the Pinelands and say, thou shalt not build here unless your grandfather lived there in 1850, which is what the Pine Barrens have done, each town makes its own decision. So you have a Fort Lee up here, you have a little Guttenberg here, you have different things in that area. We need to think regionally, okay? Yes, we have little towns that were carved out and all that issue, but we have to think of the larger regional area of what we want to preserve. And again, Boulevard East is an almost unique area in Hudson County. Now, I would ask the court reporter, could you mark this in the next O series for identification, please?
Sir, can you show that?
I was going to mark it first and then show it.
Well,
Is that the procedure, to show it first and then mark it? Thank you.
Yeah, it's the same objection I had before with respect to the violations.
But it hasn't been marked yet, so I don't think this is the time to object. You normally mark it first and then have some form of authentication, and then you have some type of proffer as to what the contents of the document is for the record, and then an objection is proffered.
Well, rules of evidence don't apply in these proceedings.
Absolutely, that's why I'd like to admit this. Okay.
What relevancy does apply. And I don't think that's relevant, and I think the problem is that it's prejudicial, because we don't know what happened with those violations. We don't know if there was a plea of guilty to the violations. We don't know if there's been adjudication. We don't know.
But we have
What about the
a
photo
thing
op?
that says, stop construction order, closed to 1814. That's not an allegation, that is a stop construction order. Notice of violation. I didn't interrupt you, sir. Don't interrupt me. No. I will show the proffer on the record. I will stand and you until I'm accorded that opportunity.
Well,
There's a objection as to relevance. Relevance is something that the board should consider. Counsel for the applicant has objected, and the grounds for that objection are, these are violation allegations. There is no conclusive, they haven't been determined if there is an actual violation. If, for instance, you all watch TV and you've seen on TV that someone goes into court and they're charged with murder, well, the attorneys on TV can't say, well, this defendant is alleged to have committed other murders. That doesn't happen. So that, well, if you're going to bring up those issues, that's something that's been objected to, and I think it's a proper objection.
But do I have a chance to give you a rebuttal to counsel's objection?
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Counsel.
Without getting into the facts of that piece of paper.
Okay, I'm making a proffer for the record, okay, both for the purposes of this board and purposes of an appeal and actual prerogative risk to the law division. So I'd like to make a proffer, okay? This is an administrative proceeding. The rules of evidence are reacts as long as there's a residuum of competent evidence, okay? The relevance of this is that the same developer has a project that appears to have some problems. The people who live on Boulevard East don't want the problems there. Let's take a look at the problems, and you can give the weight that it's accorded to the problems. And let me make a proffer for the record. If it's then stricken from the record, so it be, it's stricken. Notice of construction order. Okay.
Hold on,
All right.
there's been no determination yet, you can't just go into it.
Okay, I would like.
Mr. Chairman, for example, back in the 1990s, the building department issued a stop work order on my client's building, and there was an order condemning it and in order that it be demolished. I went into court, and we challenged it. Guess what? The building department was wrong, and the building was not demolished, and those violations were not valid. And that's very prejudicial to stand here and say, there's all these violations. We don't know who made those allegations, we don't know what the basis for those allegations, but we don't know what the determinations were. There's no building police, we don't know anything about this other than somebody wrote down there's a violation. I think it's prejudicial to say that that's gonna happen in this situation. So I don't think the board should consider that.
Okay, now, may I reply to that?
Sure.
There's no jury here, okay? There's really nobody who's gonna
These
get
citizens
present.
are jurors here.
Okay, may I? Okay, let's set up a scene. He speaks, I shut my mouth. I speak, he shuts my mouth. Is that acceptable?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. You're gonna shut my mouth?
That's what you said.
I'm gonna shut my mouth.
Mr. Volante.
I agree with you.
Now,
Mr. Volante, we're
Yeah.
allowing 10 minutes per person. There's actually,
I need to make a record.
I
Okay.
understand, but
All right.
we can just continue.
This
Why don't-
is,
Why don't, Mr. Volante,
yes.
why don't why don't you state what you think are violations, the board can hear what,
Okay.
the board, understanding the fact that violations are violations, they're not, you have no idea what has happened with these violations, you don't know if the Meridian Park Avenue has gone to court and contested them or whatnot. State,
Would you mark this for identification?
well, why don't you just state and go over.
Okay. The documents I wish to have marked for identification.
Can I just figure just one moment, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I don't think it's appropriate for Mr. Anthony to walk it out.
I've been participating this entire time, Mr. Chairman, and I think it's purposeful. I represent somebody, and I think I should be heard on the validity of the document that may or
You represent Mr. Valente?
No, that's
Well, then maybe your client can introduce it.
Wait a second.
No, it's a proper objection.
Your Honor, let's.
Wait, no one's your honor here.
He speaks, he shuts up. Okay? He speaks, he shuts up, and I shut up. Is that acceptable? Or can he interrupt at will?
Mr. Volante,
I can, yes.
please.
You can interrupt
wait,
at
Mr.
will.
Volante.
Okay, I'm a person that can interrupt at will. I can interrupt at will
Mr. Volante.
too, sir.
Mr. Volante, we need to keep this proceeding civil, please. We need to keep this civil, okay?
I am civil. I don't interrupt.
We need to keep this civil, very civil.
I think you do.
Okay.
I think it's 10 minutes or
The 10 minutes.
I think you monopolized the
We're
10
done listening to
minutes.
him make objections, Your Honor. So I asked
No,
if there's a total.
again, there is no your honor here.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Well, he's speaking for me.
All right, so, like I said, if you want to state what you believe are the violations, why don't you do that? You can tell it to the board will hear you. I told the board that, again, I've told them that these are not violations.
And you have an extra 5 minutes.
Okay?
Thank you. There's a statement by Carmela Reed to the town clerk of the Department of Public Works of West New York, saying that in reference to the project that the proposed developer has, it's already in existence down on Park Street. Stop construction order closed 2/18/14. Notice of violation.
Just for the record, it's not the same developer. It's Maria, the Park Avenue,
Okay, so there's a different corporate form. Okay, a different corporate form, there may be the same principles behind it.
That's getting in the way of a good argument.
Thank you. Stop construction order, okay, notice of violation in order to terminate, closed 1/8/14. Notice of violation in order to terminate, still opened as of date. Notice an order of penalty, still opened as of date. Stop construction order, still opened as of date. Stop construction order, still opened as of date. Notice of violation in order to terminate, still open as of date. Another notice of violation terminate, still open as of date. Notice of order of penalty, still open as of date. Notice of violation, order to terminate, still open as of date. Notice of violation, order to terminate, still open as of date. Notice of violation order to terminate closed, 1/8/14. Notice of order of penalty closed, 1/8/14. Notice of violation order to terminate closed, 1/8/14. Now, what I would ask, since this is an administrative proceeding, the rules of evidence are indeed relaxed under substantive residual rule, I'd ask this be marked for identification, and I can move it into evidence as whatever O number is in the next sequence.
Mr. Chairman, again, he read the document into the record, there's no need to mark it into evidence. I would still object, again, there's no basis to determine whether or not.
It's an Oprah. It's an Oprah request.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, yeah, you yell like the judge. All right. All right, ready? Mr. Alonso, the rules of evidence are relaxed in these hearings. And I think we're up to 12. And your objection to admitting that in evidence is noted. And again, members of the board, understand that when you're weighing evidence, your members of the board are allowed to put as much weight into evidence that's submitted as you feel is necessary, and I give you the instruction that these violations are violations that have been substantiated in any court as of right now.
Thank you, sir. And,
Again, I believe it's time, and this is other people that we know.
I understand, Mr. Alonso, to get into that. But, like, I agree with Mr. Alonso, your time is up, Mr. Volante. I think you your point. Mr. Secretary, Maria.
Good evening, everyone. There's been a lot of really great points made tonight by a lot of the people, Joe and Natalie and Jonathan Evans. And I had a question as well. Since everybody that spoke tonight was so passionate and on point, is there any way that we can get, I see a video, this being videotaped, is there any way we can get a videotape to Chairman Blaine and William and I believe it's Mohammed? Because I feel like if they're missing the passion and the emotion that all of these people have come out tonight, and we could have that seen by these three missing people.
Mr. Gordon, the official transcript of this proceeding is the court reporter sitting to your right.
No, I understand that.
I know.
And that's why I'm
So
saying
that is
the transcripts don't really do it justice. Because I read the transcripts.
It's the official proceeding.
All right, so I'm just asking, since if we could have a little bit of latitude here, and if we could
It's also, you can find it on YouTube. I know a lot of these videos are on YouTube.
And you think?
Mr. Chairman, the problem with that is, a board member is not permitted to rely on YouTube video
Yes.
to form an opinion.
He doesn't have to rely on that, he could do that in conjunction with.
A motion is not an element that we have to meet, whether or not there was or was not a motion in the testimony. Number two, number three, the video is being produced by the objectors, and it's taken out of context. This is our 9th hearing.
Would this provide, I'm sorry, go
This
ahead.
is the 9th hearing. You can't provide video just for one hearing and say, look at this, and take it out of context. It needs to be proper. The record is.
But they've been for all the other ones.
The record is the transcript.
Right. But I mean, I do believe that a video would actually provide more context.
Mr. Gordon, the only thing that I can say is that the transcript is our official transcript.
So,
That is,
I guess what I would like to say is reading the transcripts is of course, if you could pass it along to them, it's their official duty. It might serve them well, behoove them in making a decision if they could also watch this video in conjunction. And as Mr. Chapin just said, they can get on YouTube and watch it with the transcripts.
And see how inappropriate the passion was by the last objector?
I disagree with you. I disagree with you wholeheartedly.
By an attorney acting like that? It's very important.
And I think that the fact that you don't want to admit or support a video exposes your weakness of this case. But I do want to follow along a little bit. I know I don't want to be too repetitive, and I know you've heard a lot of good points, and I'll try not to be too repetitive, but I want to follow along a little bit in Mr. Evans' vein. Obviously, I'm an objector to this application, and I am appalled, actually, and astonished that this applicant and the Capitaglia Development Group would propose such an outrageous high-rise in such a small little space. But frankly, I'm really offended by their repeated attempts to impose their will on our little community here. But this is why we have a zoning board, to protect our citizens from the likes of these. I would also like to remind the board of their duty, because in my opinion, it would be reprehensible for this board to approve such a monstrosity, because it violates so many parts of our zoning laws. I mean, after all, the reason we have a zoning board is to protect our community through a set of standards, in my opinion, and rules that are designed to protect our personal property rights, as Joan touched on, and the general welfare of our community, as everybody else has touched on. Now, I understand that we also have a board so that we can provide exceptions to our rules and regulations, so as to provide some flexibility in order to get some things done around here, and to allow for property owners to exercise their rights as well. And you guys are here to make those judgment calls. However, I'm particularly offended by this applicant's repeated attempts to ask this board for excessive variances. This isn't the first time that they've come before this board and tried the same thing. I mean, take a look at the lot surface area and height variance. And I know we've talked about this before, so I'm not going to talk a lot about the size needed for this 13-story project, which is 40,000 square feet. I'm not going to talk about that they only have 20,444 square feet to work with. It's an egregious request, and you guys should absolutely move to deny this project based on that alone. Look at the percentage of the lot that they're supposed to occupy. Our zoning laws are clear here. They stipulate that a structure like this, in a small space like this, should take up no more than 75% of the land lot. Once again, this applicant pushes it to the limit and proposes using up to no less than 97% of the lot. That's almost a whole lot, guys. Look at the setback. Actually, I should say, what setbacks? Front yard, backyard, side yard requirements all require at least 15 feet of setback. Actually, the side's 17 feet, I think. They don't even come close. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the backyard, there is no setback whatsoever. Maybe 5 feet, okay? Maybe 5 feet, actually. So I feel sorry for our neighbors on McKinley Place who could be staring at a brick facade in a couple of years. I mean, if you guys aren't going to stick up for us across the street, you should at least stick up for the poor neighbors who would be practically adjoining the building should this application go through. You need to deny this application. Look at the density of this project. Our zoning laws say that a building of this size should be no more dense than 80 units per acre. This monstrosity of a project is going to have the equivalent of 334 units per acre. You can have all the hired gun experts the various reasons as to why they need to build this here, right in this teensy-weensy little space, but it's clearly and obviously way too small a lot for such size of building. And I won't talk about the FAR ratio because we have the same thing there. It's almost 4 times the allowable amount. And I'm frankly, and I hope you guys are too, I'm offended that they would even ask for these variances. And I'm offended that they would ask for 16 more variances. And they come in here into this town and they try to ride roughshod over us. I'm also quite offended with the testimony of Mr. McDonough, excuse me, who tries to pass himself off as an expert in what our community wants, just because he sat in on a couple of community meetings. And he talked about going to a couple of community meetings and he thinks he's an expert. I mean, the guy lives out in Morris Plains, I think. Imagine the stink this guy or any of these other experts would make if they tried to put a 13-story building up in their backyard, or in their front yard. He also tried to say that the building will be a net tax increase of $500,000 to our tax base, yet he won't tell us, or they won't admit to us, whether or not they're going to apply for a tax abatement. So I ask you, how could he possibly evaluate the appropriate tax benefit if he doesn't even have all the variables to do that? These guys, no matter what, will say whatever it takes to get this approved. So weigh that when you're weighing the credibility of these experts in your opinion, in your evaluation. The experts testified that the building fits in with the continuity and the character of the community. It certainly does not. Just take a walk down the boulevard from Bulls Ferry Road all the way down to King Avenue in Weehawken, and you'll find no 2 buildings, Ramon, 12 stories or higher, directly facing each other across the street. You won't find that. Not only would this be a significant break in the way our town zones itself, but it will set a dangerous precedent for the possibility of other overwhelming structures to be built on the boulevard. There's no doubt that this project will severely diminish the town's quality of life, and you must move to deny this application. Please, Jesus. These supposed experts are nothing but hired guns, and they're gonna, as I said, they're going to say whatever it takes to get this approved. I mean, I thought actually when we had comments at the last meeting, and I was watching Mr. Alonzo browbeat Mr. Kronik, who lives in the Imperial Park, the Imperial Towers, I believe it is. Park Imperial. Thank you. So, but at any rate, I just saw this guy trying to render his 5-minute opinion or comment on what he thought of the proposed development, and Mr. Alonzo tries to argue some moral equivalent about some moral equivalent argument, and the guy was actually right. But Mr. Alonzo makes our point. I mean, in 1979, the master plan was put in place to stop more high-rises from going up to preserve open air and open space and the quality of life. So yeah, the guy lives in a high-rise, but in 1979, that's when the master plan came around, not before that. So that's why we have these rules and regulations. This is why we are not Hoboken or Jersey City, nor do we want to become those places, in my opinion. At the end of the day, they had to prove to you the positives outweighed the negatives. And in my opinion, they failed miserably. If you approve this application, we're going to be stuck with the added congestion, added stress in our services, much less open space, less parking, diminished quality of life. The benefits, would it be affordable housing? No. Continuity and character of the neighborhood? No. A nursing home? No, it's not a nursing home. It's a luxury apartment, for God's sakes. And we don't need another luxury apartment on Boulevard East. What we actually need, and Joan touched on it, I believe, is the affordable housing. What we need is renovation of existing housing in the inner parts of the town. What we are in need of are parking garages. And let the record show that there wasn't even an attempt by this developer to add low-income housing to this project. And I know that resonates with you, Jesus. That's something you really want to seriously consider. They clearly have shown no regard for this community, nor did they attempt to compromise. I say that they have already proven that they would be poor neighbors to this well-established neighborhood. They offer nothing to this town except to line their own pockets and the politicians who they've greased. This application is deplorable, and I hope the board sees it our way. This application doesn't merely nibble at the edges of our zoning laws. If approved, it would completely obliterate our zoning laws. And it would be a travesty for this board to approve such a project. I appeal to this board's good sense. You don't have to approve this application. Don't let these slick lawyers dupe you and these so-called experts dupe you. There will be no turning back from this. It will be on your shoulders if you let this happen. Remember, you're only temporary appointees. Your decisions are going to be everlasting with us, and we'll have to live with your decisions, and it will be on your shoulders. There will be other developers that will want to develop a suitable structure. We will move forward, and we as citizens will let that happen as long as we can find a developer that's willing to play by the rules and build a proper conforming building. Until then, you must move to deny. So I want to thank you for giving me this 5 or 10 minutes today. I would just say one more thing, and call me cynical, but it would really behoove this board to make a decision on this application before May, and well before the town's mayoral election, if it wants to maintain any semblance of independence. Thank you.
My name is Eileen Ria Tulipan, T-U-L-I-P-A-N. T. Ria, R-H-E-A, Tulipan, T-U-L-I-P-A-N. I live at 6600 Boulevard East. I've been a resident for 36 years in the Versailles, when it was a rental building. I practice law around the corner on 59th Street, 425. I pass by here every day. I see hundreds of West New York residents in my office. Probably not one of them who could afford to rent in this new building should it be permitted to be built. So this building is certainly not being built for the West New York residents. It's being built for people who live elsewhere right now. It's being built for transient people who will have no stake in our community because they don't own. They have nothing invested. So I have also looked at the benefits and the detriments. I learned a long time ago that you make a list. You put the positives on one column and you put the negatives on another column. And you make the decision based on which outweighs the other. You're all our neighbors. You might not live right within the few blocks of Boulevard East, but you are our neighbors on this board. You are here to represent and act in the best interest of us, the residents and voters of West New York. You have no obligation to serve developers. You serve the community, and I know that's why you're here, and I know that's why you volunteer your time. This developer's plan is the utmost of arrogance in disregard of our code. In fact, the zoning put in place in the late 70s to stop the high-rise construction, which, by the way, has worked all of this time, has been continued in the recent look at and readoption of the master plan, of the zoning code. During the pendency of this application that requires so many variances of such a large type, the code was being looked at and no changes were made for that area, for that gas station. It was left in the same zoning. We all know that. We all know that. This has been pending for several years. The zoning, the master plan group apparently felt that that plan should stay as it was, and it's hard for me to imagine that you folks, or a majority of you folks, would consider that it should be changed. So let's look at some of them. The first, I know the planning board is not participating in granting tax abatements, but we also know
that all the new buildings get tax abatements. They all do. Every single one of them. I've not been at every meeting, but I did not hear the developer provide any information as to whether or not they got a tax abatement for their Park Avenue building. I'm going to assume they did. If I'm wrong, I'll accept an interruption right now to straighten me out. Am I wrong?
I didn't represent the developer in that.
But you do now. Why don't you ask them? They're right here, aren't they? Okay, they conveniently don't know.
They got one.
Of course they got one. We all know they did, and they're going to get another one. So what does that mean? It means they don't pay a dime in school taxes. It means they don't, in an overcrowded school system, in an Abbott district that must provide education for every child starting at age 3, we already don't have room. West New York has worked very, very hard to improve its schools, and it has been successful. But it can only stuff so many children into a building, and then there's just no more room. Everything on the waterfront. The developers insisted there will be no school-age children. Of course, people buy townhouses of 3 stories when they have no children. We all know that. And what has happened? There aren't enough schools for them. They are demanding their own school. And they'll probably get it because they're entitled to it. Who's going to pay for that? Not the communities that are tax abated. The rest of us will pay. It will be the same for the children across the street from where I live. By the way, I live facing the east side. I won't lose my view, but my building will lose value when the apartments on the west side will lose their western exposure view. And they will lose that sunset view that is spectacular. Traffic. Their traffic engineer's report was nonsense. As it is now, you wait and wait and wait, and it's been exacerbated. It has nothing to do with West New York, except 2 blocks away, around the corner, where the new restaurant opened up, they are squeezing so many cars into a teeny-weeny garage that they have the whole street blocked up with the buses and all the cars blocked up. It'll be the same when they get through there and go around the bend. I'm sure you've all been caught in the traffic just across from the Galaxy. That's what happens when you're squeezing more cars than you have space. If I have guests, if I'm unable to make a plan in advance when the office in our building is open, to arrange for those very few guest spots that are available at charge, by the way, they're not free. And if my guests can't get a space in the Galaxy, they can't visit. We have holidays coming up. For some it's Easter, for some it's Passover. Where do you put your guests now? So what do? I take my car out of my garage and I park on the street. 1 spot, maybe 1 guest spot. Hard to have a Seder when nobody can come. Hard to have Easter dinner when your family can't come because there's nowhere to park. I feel sorry for people who don't have a parking spot. I'm sure, and I certainly hope all of you do, because it's impossible to park in West New York. I'm with Greenberg, Walden, Grossman. We have a second lot with parking spots, and we still can't fit all of our clients and staff in. And we have people calling saying, I've been driving around the neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon, and I can't park. I'm running late. And they might park over the other side on Bergen Line Avenue and have to run out every hour to put a quarter in the meter. That's not their home where they're carrying bundles and packages and groceries and briefcases and maybe children. So, nonsense to any suggestion that there'll be no traffic. I don't take the bus to New York to go to work, but I go on Boulevard East and I see the throngs of people now standing on the corner in the morning. And I see buses come by, and when the bus finishes and leaves, because you might be behind them in a red light, there are still people there. They're not waiting for the commuter van, because that came before and that comes again. They're waiting for Transport of New Jersey. And they have to wait for the next bus, and maybe the next bus. And it's been freezing this winter, and I see people standing there shivering, and I really feel sorry for them. Sometimes I go to New York, and I want to come home on the bus, and I've had to wait on an evening, 10 o'clock at night, for 3 buses to come through before there's room to get on one. Sometimes you wonder, am I going to drive and pay 35 bucks to park because maybe I won't be able to get home? Almost tonight, Joan couldn't get home. I don't know what happened there. Affordable housing. I was here and I heard the discussion, well, the state hasn't set the standards yet. So what? Why can't they set aside 10%? Why can't they set aside 5%? Why can't they set aside 3 units? How about 1 in the basement? So maybe someone who lives in West New York could live there. That's our responsibility. The people who need housing are our neighbors. They're the citizens of our town. They vote for our commissioners and mayor. They get to have things that other people have who live in other towns. It's our job to make sure it's there for them. We don't have to wait for the state to set standards. We can require developers to do something about it, and we should start here. How we can put on our list of positive items to allow this density, I can't understand. And I'm practicing law over 40 years, and I've done a lot of this kind of work over the years. In the Versailles, we have setbacks in the front. The balconies are set back. In the back, facing the east where I am, we have a promenade above our garage deck. We have stanchions and ropes about 25 feet away from the building so that nobody is allowed to walk that close to the building line. 25 feet out, maybe it's 22. Something like that. Why is that? Because things fall off the balcony and people have been hit. How come every time there's a storm, we get notices under our door and email, take everything off your balcony, there's a storm, the wind knocks things over. And how come every time after the storm we get another one that says, people didn't secure items on their balcony and things went over. Well, where we are in the Versailles, they're not going over to people walking below. With these balconies extending over the public sidewalk line, it's only a matter of time until there's an injury. It'll be no different than when we see in New York somebody walking along the street got killed because something fell off a building, and it happened last week in a storm, if you recall. A piece of lumber, a 2x4 or something like that, went off the top of a building and killed the pedestrian below. It's only a matter of time till that happens.
I'm sorry, we're still at 1 minute.
Okay. The lights are a level of arrogance that is outrageous. Nowhere is Boulevard East, starting in West New York, commercial. Nothing commercial. The little store on the corner, no garish lights. Why would they even consider it? So that people living across can have these garish lights? We'll have to listen to their waterfalls. It'll be like a marquee lighting. Imagine what that does to night vision when you're driving past. Has anybody considered what that will do to the vision of drivers, including the bus drivers driving past? I didn't see any studies about that. What concerns me greatly is that years after they were granted their initial conditional temporary CO on their Park Avenue building, based on the document, which are official city records. This board cannot ignore official city records, because if the developer felt they were not true, then why did they accept a temporary CO? Why didn't they file suit then and say we're entitled to a regular CO, no conditions? Here's the list. It's now in evidence. Issued 10/3/11. 40 items, 40 items.
It's open.
Many of them still open as of, I'm just going to finish the sentence,
Your minute's up.
as of 1/15/15, still open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as I remember it, thank you. Martha Reiner, R-E-I-N-E-R. 6600 Boulevard East, apartment 1210.
How you doing, Ms. Reiner? I'm sorry, just 1 second. I'm just letting everybody know that at 10:30, we'll be finishing. So whoever doesn't get a chance, I guess, at the next meeting.
Well, why don't we try and finish up
Okay.
everybody tonight?
Mine should be fair.
Okay, Ms. Orlando, are you going tonight?
Am I going what?
Tonight, speaking?
Oh,
No?
I would like to have public comment this evening, if you,
All right.
yes, please. If not tonight, if there'll be another night, I'm happy to come another night, because it's so much fun for everybody.
Okay, let's okay, I would suggest, and I'll leave this up to the chairman, I would suggest that we finish up as much as we can till 10:30, and if there's 2 or 3 people in line, I will write down those 2 or 3 people in line, and that'll be, and we can get to those 2 or 3 people, or however many, at the next meeting. Now everybody's standing up. Well, why don't,
We would stand all night in New York.
Yeah,
And
no,
there
I
was
get
a
it.
fatality at the Port Authority.
all right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I keep sitting here and I have this thought for a long, long time, that people who build places should live in them for 5 years. That way, they would think twice about what they're doing. I live on the 12th floor. I face directly 67th Street. More noise from vehicles with sirens. Garbage trucks, lots and lots of stuff going on there. It worries me that that'll become very dangerous. The other thing is, when I go into New York, if unfortunately I have to go at a time when there's a lot of people commuting, I walk two bus stops up from the Galaxy so that I can get a seat. I can't stand all the way to New York. And I was on the bus one time when there was a flood down by the overpass down there to get into the tunnel. And we were detoured and people had to stand for over an hour. I can't do that. When I see 25 people standing at my favorite bus stop, I walk. I also want to say about light pollution. I'm not going to talk to variances. That you've heard enough of, and you know that. But I love the outdoors, and I don't see stars anymore. We don't see stars except on very rare occasions because of the light pollution. And to have something that's going to be lit all night is really problematic for all of us. We don't get enough dark time to really get good night's sleep. I also love the environment. I always have. I have a ficus tree that when I'm new to the building, 10 years. You've heard the others, but I have a ficus tree that I love. And I was so pleased to have a place I could put it. The first time I put it out there and went to work and came home, it was laying down. That happened twice and I bungee corded it, which really has made it not happy. I now do not put it on my balcony. There's too much wind. I've also had an occasion where I have a glider from Crate and Barrel. It's very heavy wood. I had to turn over in a storm on my terrace. I couldn't get out there to pick it up, so I climbed through the window so that I could do that. I'm trying to tell you, there's a lot of wind, and I don't think that has been taken into account. This talk about a waterfall means that you're going to have sprayed water. You know that. That's a tunnel, that wind whips up there. There are times even I have a hard time maintaining balance and walking across the street because of the wind. They're talking about I don't remember what it's called, this living wall of plants. They're going to be dead in a week. You can't maintain things like that with that wind. You just cannot do it. Any plant that I put on my terrace is low and it's protected. I put stuff up so that it cannot be blown to bits. I've tried to raise real plants. It doesn't work because of the wind. But I'm really concerned about the fact that in proposing this building, that the people who have done that and hopefully would have walked around, looked at it seasonally, seen what they were getting this building into, see if it works. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work for any of us. And it really, really concerns me. Environment, quality of life. I'm gonna be in the dark most of the time. So that's a concern. My plants, even if they could live, wouldn't be able to because they're not gonna get any sun. So I just wanted you to know that from a personal point of view. Thank you. At my age, I should have a nightlight. Got news for you. If I pull my curtains back, I get enough light that I don't need any.
I really want to focus on quality of life. I too, like Joan and a couple of other people here, moved from Brooklyn. And what appealed to me was the area of West New York. It reminded me quite a bit of Bay Ridge. And I felt at home. And living here 10 years, commuting, I worked down in Tribeca. I would take the bus in the morning, take the train. I was in work door to door, 45 minutes. I now work in Midtown Manhattan on 51st and 7th Avenue, and it takes me over an hour in the morning. Looking at, on the website, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, in the years of 2012, 2013, the passengers at the Port Authority bus terminal was 65 million for the year. That's a lot of people. We now wait online for an hour to get on the bus, coming home. During the mornings, 1, 2, 3, 4 buses go by. You can get on one, you stand, another one goes by that's half empty. The other 3 are completely filled. There's only more and more people that will be standing on that corner. The expert, the traffic expert, had told us about the bus route from Kennedy Boulevard West. Not Kennedy Boulevard East, but West. In the morning, I'm not gonna go west to head into New York, adding more time to my commute. I'd like you to consider from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, I printed up the Easy Pass usage. And on there, they have, of course, the bridges and each tunnel. And the usage is broken down by automobiles, buses, trucks, the total vehicles, and the percentage. It's a month-by-month breakdown and an annual year-to-date. Unfortunately, in 2014, we don't have the December numbers, but between 2013, the total buses that went through was 2,127,838 buses. And in 2014, just through November was 1,965,556 buses. There's more and more usage. There's more and more commuting where the density in this town, we're the 3rd in the nation. That's a lot. But
Most importantly is these tax abatements concern me. Real estate taxes will continue to go up. And who is gonna pay the difference? Us, not the new developer when he gets a tax abatement. It's you and me and everyone else in this town. That won't change. I have concerns about the lighting, that lovely red M. It reminded me of the Citizen M Hotel, located on 50th Street between Broadway and 8th Avenue in Manhattan. Now, I know Mr. Alonso is going to object. But he wouldn't object, because you can also go to the website to see, which I do have here, also with, absolutely. There's the logo of the red M. Most importantly.
These are pictures.
No, Mike, let me show you. Clearly my point is the red M. But unfortunately, I took these photos from my phone, and when I used the app on my phone to have them printed at the shop, it did not put the date and time. I could always email them to Maria, if you don't object. It's just to give an idea of what a red lighted sign looks like. And these were taken from my office, and I have my...
The problem that I have with this,
which we know you do,
is that we don't know the size and the scale. It's on top of a roof across the street. So I don't know what size.
no, it's not on top of a roof. It's on the side of the building. No, that's actually another hotel. That's from the 13th floor. 5, okay? This is from the street.
These are pictures of what?
Of the hotel, the sign, the red M.
It's not a Meridia hotel though.
No, it's not a
their sign.
Meridia, it's a different red M. But just to give you an
Yeah, I
idea.
think it's appropriate. I mean, you can get an idea from the size of the drawings that were presented to the board.
Were they red? Were they red and bright and lit?
It's color rendered.
Okay. Well, which is fine, I knew I had to. But you could always go to the website and look at the lovely app.
Please, keep it down. It's her moment right now. Everyone had their moment. I won't disturb you. It's her time. Okay, like I said, it's not your time. You had your time. It's her time right now. And you have 5 minutes.
But this is public comments, and I don't profess to be an expert. I'm just going out and walking around and seeing for myself how this red just stands out. Most importantly, we never heard from the experts the hours of illumination. What time is this red M gonna light up? And yes, it's there for marketing and advertising, but who's gonna see this M when it's blocked?
I'm sorry, 1 second. Please, can you just keep it down?
My concern, who's gonna see this red M when it's blocked by the Versailles? No one in New York across the river, no one traveling on the ferry will see it. Driving, you'll have to be underneath the building to see it, or a couple of blocks away as you drive it along, which will be a distraction. That's a hazard. Now let's talk about the marquee lights. Once again, we don't know what hours they're going to be illuminated. Reminds me of being in Times Square. I walk through Times Square every morning. I walk to 52nd and 7th from the Port Authority every morning. I didn't move to West New York from Brooklyn. Well, at least where I lived in Brooklyn, there wasn't marquee signs. We're not in Midtown Manhattan. This is a residential area. Please keep that in mind, that when you have
It's foggy, all these lights at night. I see accidents happening, and it's a very narrow area. The road is at its narrowest there. The balconies, no setbacks. So any pedestrian walking, when it's windy out, plants go flying, chairs, the electric grills that we're allowed as residents. I had mine knocked over and we're far back, and I also have a wall dividing my balcony with my neighbor, and I have it in a corner by that wall with bricks. I have to bring it in on very stormy nights or days before I go to work. I don't want to lose that grill. I don't want it to land anywhere in the front gardens, on the front walkway of the building. God forbid it should fly out further during a hurricane. Roof garden. So we're going to tie down trees. I don't see how that's really going to work. We lose our plants on our balconies now. And we're at lower levels. Someplace higher where it's completely open, I don't see that. Affordable housing. Well, what about the people in West New York? Yes, I saved to buy my apartment, and it was cheaper for me to do that than rent. So my neighbor on the bus that's renting an apartment, why shouldn't they have the ability to move into this new building? So they can't afford $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever. Those are just figures. But we should have some affordable housing for the residents in West New York. So what are the real benefits of this building? That's what I ask you to consider. What are the benefits to us as residents and taxpayers of West New York? What's the benefit to this town? Overcrowding in the school, tax abatements, possible traffic accidents. I just don't understand. So I ask you to consider everything that's all the objections that the residents have, and that's all I can ask.
Did you proffer those as
No.
the record?
Yes.
I don't know what they are.
They're
Mr.
the,
Wazzle looked at them.
yes,
From the Port Authority website.
The problem with the Port Authority website is she's counting 2 million buses. I don't believe
Those-
2 million buses are.
those are their
all over
numbers. They're not
I
mine.
understand that, but there's buses coming from all over the state.
No, I
Pennsylvania.
quoted through the Lincoln Tunnel only,
Right.
only.
Buses from Pennsylvania go to the Lincoln Tunnel. Buses from South Jersey go to the Lincoln Tunnel. Buses from West Jersey go to the Lincoln Tunnel. It's 2 million buses. They don't go through Boulevard East. So I think it's not relevant. We know that there's a lot of traffic in the Lincoln Tunnel. I don't think we need to.
Your traffic expert had said that there was an increase of what, 1% a year? And then there was a decrease, that there was no increases?
Who's talking about this area? Who's talking about the Lincoln Tunnel? That's too far and remote from this location to consider.
Wait, all the buses go through the Lincoln Tunnel.
2 million buses. We're not going to do a traffic analysis about 2 million buses and where they originate from. That's not what a traffic engineer does.
All right, but can I see it? The bus thing we're just looking at, or is this the same thing?
Would you like to see right after 65 million passengers too? Okay. No, but we're talking about the Port Authority and the passenger people.
All right, so I don't, you would like to offer this into the record in this matter to, for the statement that there's 2 million buses that go through the tunnel?
Each year there has been an increase in commuting.
That doesn't mean that there's an increase because of this area. There may be a lot of development out there, and that's where the increases are coming from, not from here.
There's also more people staying in the corner than there was 10 years ago and 5 years ago and less.
That's not going to be profit, it's a state.
I don't even see where it says 2 million.
Over zeros.
Well, while we're looking through that, we're gonna, as soon as she's done, we're gonna stop the meeting. So whoever has comments, I guess we'll do it at the next meeting.
When would that be? And
I will let you know as soon as we're done. Thank you.
All right, why don't we do this? Instead of admitting that into evidence, we will make a statement that this is a publicly accessed, it's off the website? Okay. And it shows that there is an increase in bus traffic each year through the Lincoln Tunnel. And in 2014, there were 1,965,000. Next year, there's 2,127,000. Next year, there's 2,105,000. So I've now stated that. That's what it says on the website.
It's also indicated that it's not required for the origin. So we don't know where it's supposed
I appreciate the time. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. That are here, just stand in line right there, I'll write down their names.
Okay. Would the people that like to speak, like to come up so that we take down your names and we're next meeting? We're gonna close with that, I'm sorry, but, go ahead.
Some board of church reservation tonight, but we'll be able to come to the next meeting. And I don't think that they should be deprived of their right to speak just because they're not here right now.
How else would you do it?
Ma'am, we've got to run an orderly and efficient meeting, and we had 7 people speak the last meeting. We have 14 tonight, and it looks like
We have a lot more to go.
7 more. We're gonna get 8 more that are gonna get in line tonight. We need to run a meeting, and we're giving, in fact, the law says we can put a 5-minute time limit on, but we put a 10-minute, and no one's really even followed that either. And we've gone over.
We're all really upset, that's why we're all rolling.
We've, what I believe is done an extraordinarily good job of trying to let everybody speak. So in the essence of trying to get an orderly meeting and move this along, I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a list of the 8 or 9 people that are still back there. We've now had 2 days straight of just residents, which is we're trying to allow people to speak and give everyone that right, okay?
And also, there'll be no second chances, so whoever speaks once, that'll be all. Sorry.
You're so good, you're so warm tonight.
All right, so why don't we start with the line, and I'll write down names and people that haven't gone, the 8 or 9 of you. Yeah. Why don't we do it off the record?
So go ahead.
Nope, nope, you're good now, we're just making a list.
Natalia, Jim.
E-R-T, E-A-R-T. Labor.
Can you please keep it down? Thank you.
Let me see if she can.
Jim, I'm sorry, I can't hear you over here. Ladies and gentlemen, can you keep it down in the gallery, please? Or step outside in the hallway if you gotta talk.
Great presentation, thanks.
G-H-I-R. Okay, thank you. So sorry, yeah. Well, you're here now. You don't need to get up.
Mr. Chairman, in addition, the municipal land use law permits the board not only to propose a 5-minute time limit, but also to eliminate a lot of the repetitive testing.
No, you don't get to edit the public comment, Mr. Alonso. The public gets to comment.
Excuse me. We've heard about this by everybody, we've heard about the balconies, we've heard about the traffic. It's all being repeated over and over.
So, it's okay, that's all right. It's my right. Yes, it's my right.
So right if the chairman says it's your right. Otherwise, no sign and say, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lane,
Mr. Orlando, let's keep it civil.
I'm happy to be civil, but I do not feel that Mr. Alonso has the right to edit the public comment. And I caution you to allow that to not occur. Thank you.
I can make my own decision.
Right, I'll ask Mr. Morris to.
All right, well,
I'll ask Mr. Morris to provide a legal opinion to the board with respect to the private testimony.
and what we'll also do is we'll have the transcripts by the next meeting.
Yes.
Everybody will be able to read them, and we'll go from there at the next meeting.
Thank you.
When is the next meeting?
Oh, the next meeting is April 16th, 6:30. Special meeting.
And the applicant consents to the adjournment of this.
Now.
Mr. Alonso, why don't we deal with that issue? Why don't you and I deal with that issue? You want to put it on record now?
I would.
Peggy, did you give him Carlos's name?
What did you just got? If I get most of you, that would be.
All right, so the applicant consensus is the adjournment. I believe we have to do that every time. Yeah. What's that? Oh, time is, okay. Next, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna make an announcement, please. The next hearing on this application has been adjourned to April 16th, this room, this building, 6:30 PM. No further notice is required.
April 16th.
Yes, and I didn't hear the applicant consent. Through April 16th. We're gonna address, we can address that. Okay, yes, before general.
Now we're gonna open it.
If for any reason you're on my quorum,
All right.
we ask the applicant to extend through the 16th, but in the event there happens not to be a quorum, we're going to be in the April. Concerned about that quorum, I'm not suggesting.
No, I agree.
Stuff happens,
If
so
there's-
whatever can be.
If there's not a quorum, then we certainly don't want a administrative approval. Why don't, can we, you agree to extend, extension through April 30th?
My client's already indicated.
Well, I know, knowing that the next meeting is scheduled for April 16th, and we've adjourned this to April 16th. And a very small possibility that there's not a quorum on the 16th. Would you want an administrative approval then? I mean, because that would be bad, because then the judge is just gonna, that's not the way we want to proceed.
Then we would be denied.
Please, keep it down.
We're not looking to waive any of our rights. We're extending the courtesy of extending the time through 16th, and I can't just blanket.
When's our regular meeting? All right, can you, knowing that we've extended, that we've scheduled this to the next meeting on the 16th, would your client agree to consent to the 21st?
To the 23rd. The next meeting.
23rd?
Right, we would, at this point, consent through the 23rd.
Okay, and the next meeting is scheduled for the 16th? Okay.
Will we also be on the 23rd, as of now?
We don't know.
I don't know.
Right, maybe if we're going to do it on the 23rd,
But what's on the agenda on the 23rd?
The
What?
problem,
Full agenda?
here's the problem, once you send something, sending it to the 23rd, if we're not going to work, that wouldn't be on the 16th.
Well, the only way you're not gonna get hurt on the 16th is if there's not 4 members here. Okay? The reason why I asked you to consent to extend it to the 23rd is if for some reason there's not 4 members here on the 16th, we don't have to run into a problem with the administrative approval.
We're not on the 23rd either.
So
Then maybe we could stick you on to the 23rd, or,
We can't, because then I have to renotice.
all right, well, why don't we put them on the agenda also on the 23rd, after the other ones? That way they don't have to renotice, but Meryl, I'm doing my best.
it's an older application.
I understand, and I understand. I'm doing my best. We have a lot of applications. So, scheduled for the 16th. You're on you've consented through the 23rd. You're on number 1 on the 16th and not number 1 on the 23rd.
We're the only ones in the 16th?
You're the only ones on the 16th. We'll probably hopefully finish on the 16th.
We would love that.
Keep the comments to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
How quickly is that?
Okay. Oh, okay.
There's just so much to
Oh, well, one is going to be over in 5 minutes. 10,000. I don't know. Okay.
Okay.
So you can open it to.
So now I'm gonna open it to the public for comments on this board's performance only. Would anyone like to come up and make a comment on the board's performance?
We're opening the meeting to the public for general comments, not comments on the application that we just heard.
I guess not, okay?
I got a zip.
Motion to close the meeting to the public? Yes,
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes? Roll call? Yes. Everybody, yes.
Everyone goes yes.